Since he was young, fantasy had always been his escape. Every book he read, every game he played, led him to worlds filled with swords, magic, heroes, and demon kings. Those worlds felt more real to him than reality itself. So when he finally cleared the newly launched RPG, The Legend of the Seven Heroes 2, he raised his hand in triumph. He had reached the end. After sacrificing his entire weekend, ignoring his job preparations, he wondered if his clear time might even be the fastest in the world. But the story left him unsettled. The hero's closest friend had murdered the saint, plunging the kingdom into chaos. The emperor then ordered the hero to hunt down his own friend. The truth remained a mystery, saved for the next installment. Curious, he chose to replay the game. A new option appeared, a special story with the demon sword summoning skill. Without hesitation, he selected yes. Suddenly, light swallowed everything. His body became weightless. His strength vanished. And then, darkness. When he opened his eyes again, his vision was blurred. His body would not obey him. Voices spoke gently nearby. He realized something impossible. He had been reborn as a baby. Then he heard the name they gave him. Len Ashton. The very character who would one day betray the hero and become the greatest suspect behind the kingdom's fall. He had not just entered the game. He had become its villain. Chapter 1. It was currently spring. Time had passed quickly, and more than 7 years had gone by since Len had transmigrated. This place was the western military nation of the Elfin continent, the Leomel Empire, specifically one of its no-name villages. Looking back on it, the beginning had been a great shock. At that time, Len had refused to accept this reality. However, after spending half a year trapped in the body of a baby, resistance had slowly faded and acceptance had followed. Even so, Len continued to hide the truth from his parents, keeping secret the fact that he was someone who had transmigrated. Then one day, something suddenly appeared from his wrist. It was what people referred to as a status screen. However, unlike in the game, it did not display his level, physical strength, magic power, or attack strength. Len felt that this made it seem more realistic. Still, he was certain he had never heard of the skill demon sword summoning before. To begin with, there were things called hidden skills, which were part of the game's grinding element. During a second playthrough, players could combine 3 existing skills to create a completely new, original skill. There were also unique skills, special abilities that only certain individuals could possess. As Len stared at the status screen, he became convinced that demon sword summoning was one of those unique skills. Then, without warning, a sword emerged from the ground before him. At present, Len could only summon the demon sword of wood. He felt that it was far too small, leaving him dissatisfied. According to its description, his proficiency in the demon sword summoning technique would increase the more he summoned and used the demon sword. As his proficiency rose, its abilities would continue to develop. He understood that its current ability was to wield natural magic attacks to a small extent. If his understanding was correct, it meant the power to grow plants as a combat skill. He realized that attempting something like that inside his room would not be wise. In addition to that, by fulfilling special conditions, Len could increase the number of demon sword types available to him. He understood that even if he managed to raise both the demon sword of wood element and the demon sword summoning technique to level 2, the next demon sword to be unlocked would be the demon sword of metal. At the same time, every summon consumed the magic power within his body. If that magic power were to run out, he would be struck by a severe headache. In the worst possible case, he could even lose consciousness. To prevent such a dangerous outcome, Len knew he had to train every single day and steadily increase his magic power. He could not help but think that if this were truly the game, there would have been far easier methods to raise his levels. In that moment, his father entered and checked whether he was already awake. Len was startled and immediately dismissed the status screen. His father then lifted him into his arms. Regardless of anything else, Len was certain that this power was deeply connected to the game. That realization meant there was a future awaiting him that he needed to avoid at all cost. Even if the worst possible outcome were to occur, Len understood that he had to begin training his magic power immediately to protect himself, while also learning everything he could about this world he now lived in. Now 7 years old, Len welcomed his father back home after he returned from hunting. His father looked at him and considered that it might be time for Len to begin practicing swordsmanship. He allowed Len to take any of the practice swords stored in the storeroom. Len felt pleased and accepted. His father then urged him to attack with everything he had. Len became confused by this sudden instruction. His father, unfamiliar with teaching swordsmanship, relied only on the way he himself had once been taught. Len accepted this without hesitation. At that moment, Len secretly summoned the demon sword of the wood element. He prepared himself and began. Len dashed forward and launched his attack, but his father avoided it with ease. His father acknowledged the movement and urged him to continue attacking until his body could no longer move. Len accepted those words and continued. The body Len now possessed held a surprising level of physical strength, but it was still the body of a 7-year-old child. During that first training session, he could not even endure 30 minutes. Before long, his strength gave out, and he collapsed onto the ground, exhausted and unable to continue. His father recognized his effort and acknowledged that he had done well for his first attempt. Len expressed his gratitude and encouraged his father to return home first. He remained where he was, intending to rest until he had regained enough energy to move again. His father accepted this and told him that he would return later to bring him back. Left alone, Len looked at his status screen. His proficiency had increased. It had risen because he had used the demon sword of wood. From that day onward, his daily life settled into a routine. Each morning was spent studying, and each afternoon was devoted to swordsmanship training with his father. The so-called demon stone was an item obtained from the body of a monster. Although Len was able to increase his demon sword proficiency, the demon stone his father had previously given him showed no reaction. It became clear that it would not work unless the stone came from a monster he had hunted himself. This reality made it clear that, unlike the legend of the 7 heroes, nothing would be handed to him easily. Len understood that he had to face everything with seriousness. Before long, another month passed. Len and his father continued their training as usual. During their practice, his father observed that Len's movements had improved compared to before. However, without warning, his father suddenly charged forward. Len's balance faltered too easily under the pressure. His father demonstrated that he needed to focus his strength through his waist to maintain stability. In that instant, Len was overpowered and brought down. His father looked at him and checked on his condition, deciding that the training would end for the day. However, Len refused to stop. He forced himself to continue, believing he could still go on just a little longer. His father warned him not to push himself too far, reminding him that overexertion would only lead to injury. He recognized how Len drove himself to his limits every single day and acknowledged that he had already done well. As Len struggled to rise, his father told him to rest before dinner. With that, his father turned and began walking away. Len expressed his gratitude as he watched him leave. Once alone, Len opened his status screen. At last, he realized he needed only a few more days to raise the demon sword summoning technique to the next level. Its current progress stood at level 1, 88 out of 100. He lay down on the ground to rest, a faint smile forming on his face. It had taken an incredibly long time. Even though he pushed himself beyond his limits every day, his proficiency had increased by only 2 points daily. Still, when he viewed it from the perspective of leveling up, it did not feel so discouraging. His mindset as a gamer allowed him to endure the slow progress. Recently, however, things had begun to feel slightly more interesting. Back at home, his mother, Milieu, gently held his hand as she noticed another blister. She felt concerned, seeing his once smooth hands now marked by the strain of training. She believed the training might be too harsh, especially considering his father's relentless dedication to physical discipline. Len did not see it that way. He accepted the pain without hesitation, believing that this much was nothing. He genuinely enjoyed learning swordsmanship. Milieu already understood that. The Ashton family had long served as knights who protected the village, and Len's passion for the sword was something she considered admirable. However, when Len wondered about her feelings toward swords, she revealed that it was not hatred she felt, but fear. Len found himself unable to ignore that word. His mother recalled that even when her husband had been a child, swords had been all he ever thought about. He had always been a courageous warrior, someone who did not fear even monsters. Len's father had saved her many times in the past. Yet along with that gratitude, she carried a quiet worry. She feared that such bravery might one day become a curse, that it could lead him into danger and leave him gravely injured. The thought alone was enough to frighten her. Len fell silent as he listened. His mother continued, acknowledging that she held deep respect for her husband. The monsters he hunted provided valuable income, and their meat could be shared among the villagers. His strength and effort supported not only their family, but others as well. At that moment, his father appeared behind them. He reassured her through his presence and confidence. He carried himself with certainty, believing that he would not fall to the monsters of this land. He had also become more careful than he once was. Above all, he valued his family's happiness more than anything else. Milieu was deeply moved by that resolve. Later, in his bedroom, Len lay on his bed and thought about the meaning of family. In his previous life, his parents had divorced when he was still young, and he had gone with his mother. As time passed, their conversations grew fewer. Eventually, when he became an adult, his mother stopped returning home altogether. Even so, he remained grateful that she had allowed him to attend university. Looking back, he felt there had been circumstances he never fully understood. Before long, sleep overtook him. Morning came, and Len resumed training with his father. Once again, his strength gave out, and he fell to the ground. His father decided that they would continue the next day. Len accepted it. Evening passed into night, and night into morning again. Len began to feel that his days were now far more fulfilling than they had ever been before. His routine continued without pause. He performed sit-ups with his father's assistants, practiced swordsmanship, studied from books, and shared dinner with his family. Another morning arrived. During training, Len collapsed onto the ground once more. His father immediately checked on him and decided to end the session for the day. As Len forced himself to stand, he refused to stop, believing he could still continue. Then suddenly he felt something different. His father noticed the change and grew concerned, watching closely for any sign that Len might have been injured. Len insisted that it was nothing. He realized that his body suddenly felt lighter than before. Without hesitation, he prepared himself and moved forward. He dashed toward his father and delivered a strike. Len was stunned by what had just happened. His father was equally surprised, realizing how fast Len had moved. Not only had his speed increased, but the power behind his attack had grown as well. His father, filled with excitement, urged him to continue without resting and to charge again. Len accepted and moved once more. This time, he charged forward with even greater speed. Len could hardly believe it himself. The speed was clearly his own, and the strength in his arms was rising with it. As they exchanged blows, his father struggled to understand what had occurred. In his mind, his son had suddenly become much stronger. Then, Len's strike collided with his father's wooden sword and broke it cleanly in half. His father immediately grasped the situation. Before anything else could unfold, he avoided Len's final attack, stepped forward, and lifted him high into the air. He proudly acknowledged Len's achievement, recognizing what this sudden growth meant. He realized that Len had become a skill-bearer. Milieu, hearing the commotion, grew concerned and approached them. Len's father explained that although he himself did not possess a skill and could not be completely certain, the most logical explanation was that Len's skill had leveled up as a result of his training. There was no other reason that could explain such a sudden increase in strength. Len quietly confirmed it within his own thoughts. As expected, the next ability had activated. Physical ability up, small, had taken effect. His father became filled with conviction. He believed Len did not belong confined within such a small village. He saw a greater future waiting for him in the capital, where he could rise and make a name for himself as a knight. Len was caught off guard by those words. Milieu, however, felt amazement. She looked at Len with wonder, curious about what kind of skill he possessed. Len's father then reflected on their circumstances, realizing that if they had more money, they would be able to travel to the church in town and properly examine Len's skill. Len did not believe there was any need to have his skill examined. He saw no real danger in not knowing its name, and it did not feel like something that would threaten his life. His father found this reaction unusual. Normally, children would feel curiosity and excitement upon gaining a skill. His mother also grew concerned, wondering if Len had become too indifferent towards something so important. Len remained calm in his response, believing that there were things his parents valued and rules they followed, just as he had his own reasons and thoughts. Deep within himself, he understood the truth. The rare skill known as demon sword summoning was something he had never even heard of before. Revealing it could invite unnecessary trouble and complications. His parents fell into silence. Len expressed his true wish. He hoped to live peacefully and quietly within the village. He turned his thoughts toward his future, believing that instead of becoming a famous knight, he would rather succeed his father and remain in the village. By hunting monsters together, they could increase their income and help the village grow stronger. At the same time, if the worst were ever to happen, he would be there to protect his father. For the past 7 years, Len had experienced more happiness than he ever had in his previous life. He understood that it was all because of the two people before him. Deep within his heart, he knew that he was no longer the same person he had once been. As Len, he had been given a new existence. He expressed his sincere wish to his father, hoping that the three of them could simply live long lives together as a family. His father found himself unable to respond. In that moment, his father pulled him into an embrace, and his mother joined them as well. The three of them held each other close. His father's reaction carried both warmth and restraint, unable to fully express everything he felt. To Len, this life felt like a second playthrough. This time, he intended to treasure the moments he shared with his family. He resolved to avoid the future of despair that awaited him and live a life different from the Len of the game. However, those peaceful dreams would one day be shattered in just a few short years. In the future, he would encounter someone he was never meant to meet. Someone he was destined to kill. He would stand against a changing future and an unreasonable fate. Yet the Len who existed now remained unaware of what lay ahead. Chapter 2. In the northern city of the Leomel Empire territory, an old knight named Weiss approached a lady and checked on her condition, wondering if something was wrong. She showed no sign of concern and revealed that nothing was wrong, only that boredom had taken hold now that the training had ended. Weiss shifted his gaze and saw his men lying on the ground, all of them having been defeated by her. He understood the situation immediately and recognized that his men were no longer suitable to serve as her sword practice partners. The lady then turned her attention to Weiss himself and pointed out that the same likely applied to him. She noticed the armor he was wearing and questioned his purpose, wondering where he was headed and whether something had happened within the territory. Weiss explained that he had received orders from his master to patrol the northwest region of the territory. The lady acknowledged the seriousness of such an assignment, recognizing that sending a knight of his caliber meant the matter was far from ordinary. Weiss then revealed the true nature of his mission, which was to hunt down and slay a beast. The mention of such a creature caused the lady to focus on the word itself, recognizing the weight behind it. Meanwhile, in the northwest region of the territory, Len stared quietly at his status screen. 3 years had passed since the first time he had leveled up. His skill, Demon Sword Summoning Technique, had reached level 2, and now the effects required for level 3 had become visible. However, because Len had increased the required proficiency far more than necessary, his growth had begun to feel slow and stagnant. As he continued to look at the numbers displayed before him, he reflected on the time it had taken. 3 years to reach 659. The number 1,500 still felt incredibly distant. He understood the reason behind it. It was never possible for him to train every single day. There were many days when he could not even hold a sword, as he had to help with field work and prepare for the coming winter. Each short training session only increased his proficiency by 1. Nearby, his grandmother Rig noticed him and waved, acknowledging that the young master was awake unusually early that day. Len greeted her in return with a calm and ordinary morning greeting. Even so, the power he had gained was already more than enough for him to live peacefully within the village. His grandmother mentioned to Len that, speaking of recent matters, his father had been boasting about him the day before. His father had spoken proudly, believing that the young master would one day become a great knight serving in the capital. Len received those words with quiet appreciation, feeling honored by the thought. Even so, he held no intention of leaving the village behind. Not long after, a group of men riding horses suddenly appeared over the hill. Their figures emerged without warning, moving with purpose. His grandmother immediately urged that they return home at once, recognizing them as people belonging to the Lord Baron. Len reacted with surprise as he tried to understand the situation. The mounted men soon arrived at the house of Len's parents. Weiss stepped forward and formally excused their sudden and unannounced arrival. Len's father accepted their presence calmly and expressed that there was no issue with their visit. He then asked what reason had brought them to the village where he lived. From nearby, Len observed everything in silence. In his mind, he recognized them as servants of the Baron, and their presence carried a stiff and heavy atmosphere. His thoughts turned to the Baron himself, recalling that the Baron was the one who governed this entire territory. He understood that every knight served under a noble of higher authority, a system known as feudalism. His father was one of the knights assigned by the Baron to protect this very village. As Len watched, he realized this was the first time he had ever seen fully armored knights in person. The sight made him wonder whether something serious had happened. His father then received and read the scroll handed to him by Weiss. After going through its contents, he questioned whether there had been significant damage caused by a beast in the area surrounding their village. Weiss confirmed the report. Several villages had already been attacked, and there had been casualties among the people. Witnesses described the creature as a critter-type beast, one that moved with the speed of the wind. Weiss explained that they had been patrolling the surrounding area in order to subjugate the beast. Although they had not yet discovered any clear trace of it, he stated that they wanted Len's father to join the vigilance team to strengthen their efforts. Len listened from nearby, and his thoughts lingered on the word beast. The idea of a creature dangerous enough to require the formation of a subjugation unit weighed heavily in his mind. Len's father then asked Weiss whether he had any idea of the beast's rank. Weiss answered that, at the very least, it could be considered rank D. That answer immediately caused concern in Len's father, the seriousness of the situation becoming clear. There existed a global neutral organization known as the Guild, which classified beasts according to the level of threat they posed. The ranking system ranged from the highest, rank S, down to the lowest, rank G. Among those classifications, a rank D beast stood at a level equivalent to an early-stage boss from the game. Even the combined strength of 5 average knights would still be insufficient to defeat such a creature. Len's father struggled to understand why such a beast would appear here. The creatures that normally appeared in their region were, at most, rank F. Weiss admitted that they were still investigating the cause. He further explained that, in order to strengthen security, they were planning to recruit additional knights from nearby villages. However, due to the wide area that needed to be covered, the reinforcements would take 20 days to arrive. The length of that time immediately drew a reaction from Len's father, as the weight of waiting that long became apparent. Len's mother also showed visible concern upon hearing it. Weiss expressed regret over the situation and assured them that they would do everything possible to hasten the process, asking them to endure until reinforcements arrived. Len's father accepted the reality of the situation and stated that he and the other men would increase their patrols of the forest to remain vigilant. Nearby, Len remained deep in thought, wondering about the name of the beast. He believed that he should at least be able to identify it using the knowledge he had from the game. Afterward, Len's father turned his attention back to Weiss and offered for him and his men to rest for a while, recognizing the fatigue they must have carried from their long patrol. Weiss expressed his gratitude and accepted the offer to rest. His attention then shifted toward Len, and he asked whether the boy standing there was Sir Roy's son. Len's father confirmed it and instructed Len to properly greet the captain of the knights. Len was caught off guard upon learning Weiss's true position. In his mind, he realized that this meant Weiss was the highest-ranked knight within the territory. After some time passed, the men rested, drank, and ate the food that had been provided. Once they had recovered their strength, they prepared to depart and soon took their leave. Among the departing men, one of them noted Len's age, recognizing that he was 10 years old. The man also mentioned that Len was the same age as the lady. Weiss acknowledged this and further revealed that Len was a skill-bearer. He added that under different circumstances, he would have tested Len's swordsmanship himself if they had more men available. He also expressed his hope that Len would remain safe until the situation with the beast was resolved. Roy's expression showed renewed energy as he acknowledged that their duties would only grow heavier starting that day. Len then approached his father and asked about the beast's wanted notice, hoping to see it for himself. His father dismissed the concern and reassured him that there was no need to worry. He revealed that he had once hunted a rank D beast alone. Len was stunned by that revelation, repeating the meaning of those words in his mind. His father confirmed it calmly, explaining that it had happened before Len was even born. Within Len's thoughts, the truth became clearer. He had always known that his father was strong, but realizing that his father possessed strength greater than that of 5 knights combined made everything fall into place. It explained why Len had never managed to defeat him, even though his father did not possess any special skills. Later that same day, his father returned from hunting, carrying several boars. Len noticed the size of the catch and recognized that it had been a significant hunt. His father acknowledged this and revealed that he intended to increase the amount of prey they gathered for the time being. His father explained that the small boars living around their area were known for their delicious meat. Because of that, there were also beasts that came specifically to hunt and feed on those boars. Len understood the reasoning behind it and realized that such a beast would not easily approach if its source of food became scarce. He recognized that his father's plan was to reduce the number of those easy prey boars. His father confirmed that this was correct. He explained that the only traces left behind by the beast were its feces and footprints, and that carefully examining the animal trails would be key. With thorough searching, it would still be manageable, especially since there was no certainty that the creature would appear in the nearby forest. Len accepted his father's reasoning. From that point on, his father's routine began to change. Normally, he hunted only during the morning, but after receiving the warning from the knights, he started entering the forest in the afternoon as well. His hunts stretched longer, continuing until sunset. Later, inside their home, Len and his father sat together in the large bath. Len observed his father closely and felt that he had been pushing himself harder than usual. He believed that the time had come for him to start helping with the hunting. His father acknowledged the thought and agreed in principle, but decided that it would have to wait until the matter of the beast was resolved. His father also expressed regret for being unable to accompany Len during his sword training. Len understood the situation and accepted it calmly. Both he and his mother were already busy handling the small boars his father brought back from hunting. There was barely any time left for swordsmanship. He knew that letting the meat spoil would be a waste. His father understood this and expressed his gratitude for Len's help in supporting his mother. After that, Len fell into silence as a realization settled in his mind. He wished for nothing to disturb the peaceful life they had lived for more than 10 years. It was a life he did not want to lose. His eyes rested quietly on his father. Time continued to move forward, and the days passed one after another. Eventually, the 10th night arrived. Len began to feel uneasy. A growing concern formed in his chest. He approached his mother and told her that his father had not yet returned. The lateness of the hour only deepened his worry. His mother acknowledged that it was true, realizing that he had not yet returned, and decided that she would go and check on him herself. Len immediately insisted on going with her. His mother refused, knowing that it was already dark outside and that the night carried danger. Len could not accept that decision. He understood that it would be too dangerous for his mother to go alone, and he resolved that he would go with her even if she tried to stop him. His mother fell silent for a moment. A quiet fear surfaced within her, the kind that came from imagining the day her son might be seriously hurt. In the end, Len and his mother stepped outside together. The darkness surrounded them completely. Len realized how little he could see, and it became clear to him that this was the first time he had ever gone outside at night. His mother carefully warned him to watch his footing. She then pointed toward a faint light in the distance and directed his attention to it. That light marked the entrance to the forest, coming from the torches placed along the bridge. She asked him to listen closely to the sound of flowing water and reminded him to be careful not to fall into the river that separated the village from the forest. As they continued forward, Len felt his eyes slowly begin to adjust to the darkness. His mother reminded him that they could only go as far as the bridge, because beyond that point was the domain of beasts. Then she noticed something ahead. On the other side, beneath a tree, there was the figure of a man sitting alone. She recognized him immediately as her husband and called out to him. Roy turned his head in their direction. Len confirmed to himself that it was truly his father, and his mother felt relief knowing that Roy was alive. Still, Len could not understand why his father was sitting in such a place. Without hesitation, Len and his mother ran toward him. As she reached him, Milieu focused her attention on her husband. In that moment, the truth became visible. Roy was severely wounded, his body covered in blood, and his hand clutched tightly against his abdomen where a grave injury had been inflicted. Quick pause. If you're enjoying this, help us reach 1,000 subscribers. One click equals instant power-up. Subscribe now. Back to the story. Chapter 3. Milieu urged her husband to pull himself together. Then Len noticed the sound of footsteps approaching. He raised his torch and pointed it toward the darkness, trying to see what was there. Suddenly, a boar burst forward and charged straight at him. Len managed to block its mouth, but its jaws pressed closer, threatening to clamp down on him. His mother struck the boar from behind, hitting its back. Len urged his mother to run. At that moment, 2 more boars appeared nearby. Len struggled at first to hold his ground, pushing against the boar's mouth with effort. Then he felt the difference. He realized he was able to push it back. This was the effect of physical ability up, small. Len forced the boar aside and threw it away, sending it crashing into the other boar. Another boar lunged toward Milieu, but Len moved quickly and struck the back of its neck before it could reach her. He was surprised that it only took a single hit. Then another boar lunged toward his back. Len reacted in time and struck upward, sending the boar off balance. The boars fell to the ground, and the last remaining one fled. After it was over, Len realized that he could fight them. He understood that his strength came from all the training and skills he had built until now. Morning arrived. Inside their house, Granny Rig prepared homemade medicine. Granny Rig told Milieu and Len that they could finally feel at ease. Roy's condition had been unpredictable, but it had calmed down at last. Milieu felt relieved and expressed deep gratitude toward Granny Rig. She was thankful for Len as well, knowing she would not have been able to bring Roy back without his help. Len also felt grateful that his father was safe now. However, Len knew that his father would never have been defeated so badly by such weak monsters. It was likely that he had encountered one of the wanted monsters. Len wondered if those monsters were still inside the forest. The reinforcements would not arrive for another 10 days. In Len's thoughts, if that monster were to come into the village, he feared that his mother and the other villagers could be attacked as well. He understood that there must be something he could do now. Len crossed the bridge. As he walked forward, he noticed it. It was the small boar from yesterday. In his thoughts, he felt relieved. It seemed that it had not yet been eaten by other monsters. It would be bad if its presence ended up attracting that certain, wanted monster. He knew he needed to hurry and bring it home. Then white wisps of spirit energy began to rise from the boar's body. Len was caught off guard as the energy drifted toward him and entered his bracelet. The energy was absorbed into his bracelet. As he checked his status screen, he confirmed his expectation. The proficiencies of Demon Sword Summoning Technique and Demon Sword of Wood had both increased by 2. He understood that this came from absorbing the magic power of the Demon Stone inside the monster's body. As he carried the boar back home, Len reflected on it. The bracelet had never absorbed anything when he was younger. It seemed that it would only work if he hunted the monster himself. When he returned home, he turned to his mother and told her that there was something important he wanted to discuss. He informed her that starting tomorrow, he would take over his father's duty. His mother reacted with shock and fear. Len acknowledged the danger, but he understood his responsibility. As someone born into the Ashton family, just like his father, protecting the village was his duty. His mother reminded him that no matter how strong he had become, he was still a child. Len answered with resolve. With his father injured, he was the only one left in the village who could fight the monsters. His mother fell silent. Len admitted that what he was asking was unreasonable. Still, until reinforcements arrived, he asked for her permission to protect everyone. His mother remained speechless. That night, Len's mother showed no sign of sleeping. She remained awake, burdened with worry. However, when morning came, she allowed Len to enter the forest, on the condition that he returned before dusk. Len remembered her warning clearly. He was not to enter the depths of the forest. If he ever lost his way, he could use Tsurugi Rock, the sword rock, as a landmark. In his thoughts, Len reflected on the named Tsurugi Rock. After walking through the forest for about an hour and a half, a massive rock would come into view. Its tall and sharp form resembled the shape of a sword, which was how it came to be called that name. As Len looked at the sword he carried, he realized that he had not yet tried the attribute of the demon sword of wood, Natura Magic, small. Inside the game, there had been a powerful boss capable of using natural magic. Then, he heard movement coming from a nearby bush. A small boar suddenly ran toward him. The sudden appearance startled him. It was another small boar. Len thought about how to use magic. He attempted to cast Tree Sprout, then Ivy. At once, a small sprout emerged from the ground. More followed, rapidly growing and wrapping around the boar. The vines tangled tightly around its body, trapping it in place. Len was surprised by what he saw. The effect was far greater than he expected. As he looked at the trapped boar, he realized he could not bring himself to prolong its suffering. He decided to end it with a single strike. Although it consumed magic power, natural magic was very easy to use. Len began using the approaching small boars as opportunities to practice and improve his control. Some time later, back in the village, a man looked on in astonishment. On his first day, Len managed to hunt 12 boars. On the second day, he hunted another 12 small boars. By the third day, he increased his results even further. On the fourth and fifth days after entering the forest, Len continued increasing the number of boars he hunted, all without encountering that certain wanted monster. As Len looked at his status screen, he realized that he would soon unlock the demon sword of metal. In his thoughts, he felt a sense of anticipation toward that moment. Later that night, Len returned home and announced his arrival. Granny Rig turned toward Milieu and informed her that Roy's condition had worsened. She told Milieu that she would take care of him and asked her to wait outside. Len turned toward his mother, wanting to know what had happened to his father. His mother remained silent at first. Then she revealed that Roy's condition had suddenly worsened since dusk. They had already used a large amount of their precious medicinal herbs, yet he was barely holding on to his life. Len was shaken and tried to understand why this had happened. His mother, overcome with grief, could only admit that she did not know. Inside the room, Granny Rig realized that their stock of medicinal herbs was almost gone. By tonight, there would be none left. Granny Rig came out of the room and told Milieu to retrieve the formula box from her house, as her husband knew where it was kept. Milieu understood immediately and hurried away to get it. Len felt uneasy as he thought about his father's condition. He turned toward Granny Rig and asked if there was anything he could do to help. He wanted to know if the medicinal herbs still grew somewhere nearby. Granny Rig explained that the herb no longer grew anywhere in the surrounding area. Long ago, it had grown near the base of Tsurugi Rock, but it had gone extinct during a harsh winter several decades earlier. Len was stunned by this. He then noticed the herb placed on the table and asked if that was the same herb. Granny Rig confirmed that it was. She apologized to him and told him to wait outside while she continued treating his father. As Len stepped out of the room, his mind focused on a single thought. He was thinking about the herb known as rondo grass. There was no mistake. It was a healing item he had often used back when he played the game. In his thoughts, he questioned whether it had truly gone extinct. He could not accept it without seeing for himself. He knew that the forest became far more dangerous at night. Even so, he began running toward the forest. He understood that if he did nothing, his father would surely die. There was no time left to hesitate. Len continued running until he reached Tsurugi Rock. He arrived at its base and stopped at the foot of the massive formation. In his thoughts, he confirmed what he expected. There was no sign of the herb at the base of the rock. Then he raised his eyes and looked toward the peak of Tsurugi Rock. He believed he could reach the top by using natural magic. Without delay, he cast his magic. Vines began to grow along the rock's surface, and Len used them to climb upward. After climbing for some time, he noticed unfamiliar grass along the way. Eventually, he reached the peak of the rock. There, he found many patches of rondo grass. It had not gone extinct. As he gathered the rondo grass, Len believed that with this amount, he would be able to save his father. Then he noticed something nearby. There were bones scattered on the ground. They were the bones of small bears. He wondered why such remains were in a place this high. Looking closer, he saw that there were not only bones, but ornaments as well. As he climbed back down, a sense of unease settled over him. While running back, he encountered 3 small boars. They stood directly in his path. Len struck them down without delay. Then he realized something was wrong. The small boars seemed frightened, as if they were trying to escape from something. Len then heard the sound of heavy breathing. He turned back and saw a strange monster standing on top of the mountain rock. He recognized it at once. This was the wanted monster. The monster was white, with 4 tails and 6 eyes. It was a unique D-rank monster, a chief wolven. Chapter 4. Chief Wolven was a beast whose power stood at the very peak of D rank. By defeating it, one could obtain a rare item. It was not an ordinary monster, but a rare breed known as a unique monster. Len ran quickly, trying to escape from it. As he glanced back, he saw nothing behind him yet. But in the next instant, it suddenly charged toward him. He managed to dodge the charge and immediately leaped onto a tree. The wolven chief attacked him again, but Len was able to avoid it once more. In his thoughts, the situation was bad. In terms of speed, it clearly had the advantage. Moreover, this was no ordinary beast. Its trait was, before he could finish that thought, the wolven chief suddenly disappeared. He was caught off guard by the fact that it had vanished. The chief wolven possessed the ability to use wind magic. By gathering wind around its body, it could create invisible hands. This ability allowed it to steal items, and naturally, it also used wind magic as a form of attack. Within his mind, Len realized how bad the situation truly was. This was not an enemy he was meant to face. But there was no way it would allow him to escape. He needed to think of a way for his current self to win. The attack power of his natural magic was still low. There was no other choice but to find a way to get close to its stomach. But if he failed, the outcome would be certain. Then he noticed something. His eyes focused on the wolven chief's legs. He saw what appeared to be a wound on one of its legs. He wondered if his father had been the one who caused it. At that moment, he reached an understanding. That was how his father had managed to escape. The reason it had not attacked the village yet was likely because of that wound. He then remembered his father. His father had fulfilled his duty as a knight. Len, too, could not allow himself to give up here. At that moment, the chief wolven released a massive roar, accompanied by a powerful gust of wind. Len remained calm as he placed his hand on the ground. He searched for a way to use his nature magic. Vines and leaves began to grow, forming a barrier around him to protect him. But the powerful roar of the chief wolven shattered them, causing the vines and leaves to collapse. Even so, the vines managed to tangle around the chief wolven for a brief moment. In his thoughts, he knew he had to stop its movement, even if only for an instant. Len leaped toward the chief wolven. With all his strength, he struck its head. But in the next moment, shock ran through him as his sword shattered. The magic sword of wood had been destroyed. He wondered if he could summon it again. As he attempted to re-summon the magic sword of wood, the chief wolven prepared its counterattack. The magic sword of wood appeared once more in his hand. But immediately after, a sharp pain struck his head. He realized that the act was consuming too much of his mana. He wondered if it was because he had tried to re-summon the broken magic sword. While he was off guard, the chief wolven attacked and bit into his body. In that moment he saw the wound on its leg. While trapped within its jaws, Len struck directly at that wound. The chief wolven reacted by throwing him violently into a tree. He hit the tree and fell to the ground. The chief wolven glared at him with anger. As Len lay there, he used nature magic once more, causing vines and leaves to grow and surround him in protection. The chief wolven moved toward him and tore away the vines by biting through them. Inside the fading protection, Len realized that at this rate he might lose consciousness from the bleeding. He reached for one of the rondo herbs. He understood that he could use it to heal himself. But he remembered his father, who was dying. He closed his eyes, then opened them again, deciding that he must not use it, because there might not be enough left for his father. Len nearly forgot the reason he had come there. He thought deeply as the chief wolven slowly approached him. Then he realized that there was still one weapon left for him. His eyes turned toward his status screen. The chief wolven stepped back slightly. In that instant, Len suddenly burst forward, breaking away as he ran. His body was badly wounded, but he forced himself to move. The chief wolven growled as it chased him. When Len glanced back, he focused his thoughts and willed it to stay still for a moment. In response, vines and leaves surged forward and tangled the chief wolven once again. Len no longer had any mana left. He needed to hurry. The chief wolven soon broke free from the vines. Len ran toward the corpses of the little boars he had slain earlier. He only needed 3 more. In his mind, he understood that if he absorbed the power of their magic stones, the magic sword of metal would be unlocked. Behind him, the chief wolven was closing the distance. If the magic sword of wood could not defeat it, then he had no choice but to rely on his plan. He threw his wooden sword toward the chief wolven. The beast avoided the direct hit. At that moment, the magic sword of wood released countless vines, binding and tangling the chief wolven once more. As Len absorbed the power of the magic stones, memories surfaced in his mind. He remembered the moment when his family embraced each other. He held firmly to the thought that he needed to find a way to save his father. At last, the absorption was complete. He resolved within himself that he would not lose here. The chief wolven closed in behind him. Len gathered a bright energy within his hands. As the monster's attack drew near, he used the very last of his strength and plunged his sword forward. The blade, shining with intense light, pierced through the chief wolven's mouth and tore through to its head. Chapter 5. The sword pierced through the chief wolven's head, and the monster died. Len now held the magic sword of metal, and as he laid the body of the slain monster to rest, the sword began absorbing the magic stone of the chief wolven. As he rested, he realized how bad his condition was. His body would not move at all. He held his bag tightly, his thoughts drifting to his father and mother. Not long after, a group of men riding horses approached. One of the men had noticed the cry of a beast coming from that direction. Len looked at them as they drew closer. When the men arrived, they found the place where the monster had been slain. Soon after, they rode toward the house of the Ashtons. A man knocked on their door, asking if anyone was there. Milieu opened the door, and the men introduced themselves as knights from Clausel. Another knight explained that there was no time to waste and asked to excuse their lack of greetings, as they needed to hurry and bring Len to his room. Milieu was shocked when she saw Len, badly hurt. She tried to understand what had happened, but the knight explained that they had only just arrived themselves. He then showed the bag Len had been holding, noting that Len seemed desperate to keep hold of it, suggesting there might be something important inside. Milieu opened the bag and found the rondo grass. She immediately realized that Len had gone out to retrieve it. Tears fell as she embraced Len tightly. After that night, in the Leomel territory, a knight began reporting about Len Ashton. Before he could finish, Weiss reacted with surprise upon learning that Len Ashton had defeated the chief wolven alone. A lady arrived and heard the report. She learned that a boy capable of defeating a D-rank beast single-handedly existed within their territory in Leomel. 2 months later, Len checked the progress displayed on his status screen. This was the magic sword of Bandit. To him, it felt more like armor for his fingers than an actual sword. In his thoughts, he reflected on how defeating the chief wolven had allowed him to obtain a new kind of magic sword. As Len wandered through the forest, he picked something up and climbed onto a rock. A knight called out to him, addressing him as Lord Len. The knight reminded him that he was still not in his best condition and pointed out that Len had been asked to inform them whenever he planned to enter the forest. Len expressed his apology. As Len and the knight rode on horseback, Len reflected on how he had managed to survive because they had arrived faster than expected. He expressed his gratitude. The knight responded that hearing those words made their hurried response worthwhile, and he acknowledged how Len had surprised them with his physical strength. The knight then asked Len about the bag, suggesting that it might be that, but before he could finish, Len confirmed it. He revealed that it contained the treasures hidden by the chief wolven. Len explained that he planned to sell it and use the money to help the village, though he was concerned about the taxes and whether it would truly be allowed. The knight informed him that the reward for this year was tax exemption. He explained that the raw materials from the chief wolven that Len intended to sell were extremely valuable medicinal materials, and the Lord was purchasing them at a slightly higher price than the market value. With that, the village would likely prosper for the next few decades. Len felt relieved and recognized how incredible that outcome was. At the Ashton house, Sir Roy had finally recovered enough to be up. He was pleased and had already learned about the treasures Len had obtained. He reflected on how much Len had accomplished. As Len handed the treasures to his father, he acknowledged that it was not his achievement alone, and that it was thanks to his father that he was even able to defeat the beast. His father laughed warmly, recognizing Len's continued selflessness. He then wondered if Len desired anything for himself. Len asked for the beautiful stone his father was holding. In his thoughts, he recognized it as the Salacia pearl. Even among the rare items dropped by the chief wolven, it was considered extraordinarily rare. There was also something about it that made Len curious. He then showed the bracelet to his father and asked if he could keep it as well. This was the bracelet he had been wearing, and in his thoughts, he realized that he could now wear it openly. His father agreed without hesitation, allowing him to keep it. His father reminded him that what he had done was reckless and that it had caused him worry as a parent. He gently patted Len's head. He then told Len that he had done well, risking his life to protect everyone, and acknowledged how remarkable Len had been. And so, after such a long period of peace, events had finally reached this point in the nameless village. Outside, Len walked while doing his chores. His attention was drawn to a girl sitting on a rough stone wall, overlooking the valley. She noticed him as well. Len observed her carefully, realizing that she was not a child from their village. She asked if he was Len Ashton, and he confirmed his identity. As he looked at her, he hesitated. In his thoughts, there was a strange sense of familiarity, as if he had seen her somewhere before. In that moment, Len realized that this was a fateful encounter, and the quiet beginning of a new story. Chapter 6. The girl revealed that she had always wanted to meet Len. She then drew 2 swords, tossing one of them onto the ground before asking about his injuries. Len gently placed the item he had been carrying onto the ground. He confirmed that his wounds had already healed, and questioned how she even knew who he was. After that, he bent down and picked up the sword. Instead of answering him, the girl simply acknowledged that since his wounds had healed, they would begin. Len reacted with confusion, unable to understand what she meant. The girl raised her sword and pointed it at him. Without hesitation, she rushed forward and launched an attack. Len reacted instantly and blocked it. The sudden strike caught him off guard. She continued her assault, delivering multiple strikes in succession. Len managed to block every single one of them. The girl expressed her amazement, praising his ability. She acknowledged how well he handled his sword, even after falling behind. Still confused, Len questioned why they were suddenly fighting. He could tell that the girl was highly skilled. She reassured him that there was nothing to worry about, as the blade had been dulled. In his thoughts, Len realized that the dull blade did not make the situation any less serious. He began to wonder if she had planned this match from the beginning. He recognized that the situation was becoming troublesome. There was no other choice. Before either of them could get injured, he decided that he would force an end to it. In the next instant, Len moved decisively and pinned her down. He declared his victory. As he remained above her, the girl became flustered and quietly murmured something. Len tried to understand what she was attempting to say. The girl suddenly shouted that he was too close. Len immediately stepped back and apologized. She then stood up, composed herself, and told him once more to prepare his sword. Len reacted in confusion, realizing that they were truly going to continue. The girl insisted that of course they would continue, because she had not admitted defeat yet. Len could not believe it. In his thoughts, he struggled to understand what was even happening. At that moment, a group of knights arrived. One of them called out, addressing her as princess and urging her to stop. The girl reacted with surprise at their sudden presence. She then fell silent and asked Len to allow her to explain. After that, she performed a proper curtsy. She took out a sealed envelope and presented it. Acting as the representative of her father, she had come to deliver a letter to the Ashton family. She conveyed that her father had spoken highly of the Ashton family for their triumph over the chief wolven. He also held great expectations for Len Ashton's future. At that moment, Len felt a sudden realization forming in his mind. He thought that it could not be possible. Then the girl revealed her name. She was Lisha Clausel, the Saintess of White. Len's eyes widened as the truth settled in. The name Lisha Clausel carried unmistakable meaning. Weiss respectfully questioned the princess, asking why she had proceeded alone without informing him, and even more concerning, without any accompaniment. Lisha explained that they had been taking too long of a break. Len's realization was now complete. She was the same girl he was supposed to kill in the world of the Legend of the Seven Heroes. He could not understand why she was here. Later, back at the Ashton residence, many things had taken place. Princess Lisha spoke with Sir Roy. The knights spent their time drinking. Lisha and Len also spoke with one another. Len lowered his head as his thoughts grew heavy. He could not comprehend how things had turned out this way. Lisha Clausel, the Saintess of White. In the Legend of the Seven Heroes, she did not join the protagonist's party during the event battles, yet her strength was considerable. She was someone the protagonist could not match unless their level had been raised significantly. Lisha Clausel was also known as a highly popular figure because of her exceptional appearance and personality. However, it was widely understood that she could not be romanced. Because of this, she was regarded as the unconquerable heroine. While they were having tea, Lisha asked Len whether he had any plans to come and visit them. Len was caught off guard by the question. Lisha explained that she had personally come to this place to see for herself the abilities of the one who defeated the chief wolven. She acknowledged that their sparring match earlier had already convinced her. She recognized that Len was not only strong, but also courageous. She noted that even when suddenly faced with her challenge, Len chose to pick up the sword without hesitation. In Len's quiet thoughts, he reflected on how sudden that request for a match had been, and he felt that he had been completely caught off guard. Len had previously heard from one of the station knights that this village was located within the Clausel frontier. However, it seemed that reaching the city from here would take more than 10 days on horseback. Len had believed that as long as he remained secluded within their distant village, he would never encounter Lisha, the daughter of the feudal lord. Yet in his inner thoughts, he found it difficult to accept that Lisha had come all the way to their village of her own accord, simply to meet him and spar with him. Lisha noticed his state and asked what was troubling him. Len admitted that he feared she had overestimated him. He acknowledged that his father had already injured the chief wolven, and that their victory had not been achieved through his strength alone. Len told Lisha that, in truth, during their sparring session earlier, he had not even known the proper techniques. He admitted that he did not believe he possessed the courage that Lisha had spoken of. Lisha told him that there was no need for him to be so humble. She believed that if it had been anyone else, they would have proudly boasted about defeating such a monster. She also recognized that Len was different from the nobleman who relied only on words without substance. Because of this, she expressed her desire for Len to come to Clausel with her no matter what. That way, they would be able to spar whenever they wished. Len fell into deep thought. It seemed clear to him that Lisha truly enjoyed sword fighting. From their earlier spar, he could tell that she was someone who trained seriously and put in real effort. Even so, he felt that it would be best for him to keep as much distance from her as possible. Len apologized, admitting that he might disappoint her, but he had no intention of leaving his village. Lisha became silent for a moment. She then expressed her feeling that Len had been trying to distance himself from her the entire time. She wondered whether Len disliked her. Len immediately denied that idea. He explained that if he were to leave, his father would be left alone as the only person capable of protecting the village. He knew that if another demon like the chief wolven appeared, the village would truly be destroyed. Lisha understood his reasoning. Even so, she resolved within herself that she would not give up. One morning, Len's family shared breakfast together with Lisha. Time passed, and night eventually arrived. Len went to the stable to check on the horses. Suddenly, the sound of a sword falling onto the ground broke the silence. Lisha stepped forward. Len realized the situation and wondered if this was meant to be training after their meal. Lisha acknowledged his realization, believing that his awareness made things easier for her. She had already obtained permission from Weiss and from Len's parents, leaving nothing for him to worry about. Len became flustered. In his thoughts, he was surprised that Lisha had even managed to persuade Weiss. He lowered himself to pick up the sword, but his hand hesitated. In his mind, he considered the possibility of simply refusing and not picking it up at all. Lisha made it clear that if he refused to take up his sword, she would extend her stay where he was. Faced with that, Len picked up the sword. He accepted the situation, claiming that he had also been in the mood to train. Lisha fell silent briefly. She questioned why Len was going so far just to reject her. She believed there had to be a reason behind his actions. She made it clear that he would have to reveal that reason when she defeated him. She also expressed her intention of bringing him to Clausel with her and urged him to prepare himself. Len countered with the possibility of him being the one to win. Lisha responded that if that happened, she would simply return to this village again. Len quietly resigned himself to the situation. In his thoughts, he realized that no matter the outcome, there was no favorable result for him. Lisha suddenly rushed forward and attacked while Len was off guard. Even so, Len reacted quickly and blocked her strike. Their sparring continued. Lisha was surprised, unable to understand how Len had managed to defend himself despite being unprepared. Len reflected on her words, but questioned why she was so determined to defeat him in the first place. Lisha revealed that she hated losing. Even as the Saintess of White, she could not accept losing to someone her own age. Len struggled to understand how her title was connected to this matter. Lisha explained that her power as the Saintess of White granted her exceptional proficiency in swordsmanship and physical ability. In addition, she possessed the ability to cast sacred magic. Because of this, losing was something she found deeply frustrating. From that moment on, she resolved to become serious. With firm confidence, she declared her intention to defeat Len. Len quietly realized that Lisha had become much faster and stronger. Her presence felt different, as though she had become another person entirely. He understood that this must be the effect of her sacred magic. In his thoughts, he recalled that sacred magic was a combination of white magic and holy magic. White magic carried the power to heal wounds, while holy magic possessed the ability to counter the undead curse and remove toxins. Together, they formed a powerful magic that could also enhance the abilities of allies. Len released a swift strike, but Lisha reacted immediately. She leaped onto a nearby tree and used it to propel herself forward, returning with a counterattack. Len raised his sword and blocked it. In his inner thoughts, Len concluded that sacred magic, swordsmanship, and enhanced physical abilities were all combined within the skill of the Saintess of White. He recognized that Lisha became especially strong when she entered this state. Len questioned why she had not used that power earlier. Lisha acknowledged that she was aware of it, and that Weiss would scold her if she used it without permission. Len understood that this meant she had received permission this time. He could not help but think that Weiss was overly indulgent toward Lisha. Even so, Len decided that it was time for him to become serious as well. By now, he had grown accustomed to Lisha's movements. Lisha launched another forward attack, but Len avoided it. He immediately stepped in, his sword drawn, and thrust the blade directly toward her neck. Len recognized that Lisha was strong. However, when he compared this to the time he faced the chief wolven, he could still see the difference. He once again aimed his sword at Lisha's neck. Lisha attempted a counterattack, but Len lowered his body and dodged it. In the next moment, Len seized her arm and locked it in place. He raised his sword and pointed it at her neck once more. Lisha refused to stop. She continued her attacks, but Len blocked every single strike. Then suddenly, Len struck her foot, causing her to lose balance and fall instantly. As Lisha lay on the ground, Len knelt beside her and placed his sword at her neck, signaling that the match was over. Len declared his victory. Lisha struggled to accept the outcome. She quickly stood up again. Len prepared himself for another round. Lisha insisted that she had not yet lost. Len found it difficult to believe that she still refused to accept defeat. Lisha and Len remained facing each other, both still preparing to continue their fight. Suddenly, the sound of clapping echoed nearby. It was Weiss. He praised Len, recognizing that at such a young age he possessed astonishing skill, enough to defeat the young lady even while she was using her sacred magic. Weiss acknowledged that it was no surprise Len had been able to defeat the chief wolven on his own. He noted that in addition to Lord Roy's training, Len must have devoted great effort to reach such strength. Weiss then turned his attention to Lisha. He recognized that she had fully understood Len's strength through this experience. He expressed his hope that once she returned to the residence, she would use this defeat as motivation. Lisha fell silent for a moment, quietly accepting his words. She then stepped forward toward Len and expressed her apology for suddenly intruding on him earlier that day. She regarded the experience as valuable. Len also acknowledged that it had been a meaningful experience for him. Afterward, Lisha turned and walked away, deciding to go and rest. Weiss then faced Len and offered his apology on Lisha's behalf. He hoped Len would forgive her actions. He also assured Len that he would personally convey to the Baron that the Ashton family had provided generous hospitality. Len dismissed it modestly, believing that he had done very little. Weiss disagreed and affirmed that Len had done more than enough. Weiss explained that recently, even his own subordinates, including those around Lisha's age, had been unable to match her. Because of this, she had begun to grow complacent. He believed that this experience had served as an important awakening for her. Weiss admitted that if it had been possible, he would have preferred to remain for a few more days so that they could continue sparring. In Len's inner thoughts, he strongly wished to avoid such a situation. Weiss then explained that they would be departing the next morning. Lisha herself had negotiated with her father in order to come to this village and carry out several responsibilities. Len quietly acknowledged this information. Weiss further explained that Lisha had been visiting the surrounding villages on behalf of the Baron. Her duty was to calm the unrest caused by the recent turmoil. In Len's thoughts, he realized how remarkable Lisha truly was. At her age, she was already acting as a substitute for the feudal lord. He understood then that she was not simply a proud noble girl. Lisha excelled in both military and academic pursuits. Within the world of the legend of the Seven Heroes, she was known for achieving the highest grades at the academy. In Len's thoughts, Lisha came across as somewhat overbearing and difficult to understand. Even so, he sensed that deep down she was a straightforward and good person. He then remembered the fate that awaited her. He was supposed to kill her. Even now, he could not understand how things had led to that outcome. At the same time, the childhood relationship between Len and Lisha had never been deeply explored in the game. Despite that, Len had never expected to meet her at such an early point in time. Morning arrived at the Ashton residence. Inside her bedroom, Lisha remained awake, unable to sleep at all. She realized that she could not simply give up here. Soon after, she began writing a letter. Once she finished, she handed it to Weiss for him to read. Weiss quickly understood that it was a letter addressed to Len. Lisha explained that she intended to give it to Len before their departure. She also mentioned that she was preparing another letter to express her gratitude to the Ashton family. She believed that her feelings about inviting Len to Clausel could be expressed more clearly through written words. She sought Weiss's opinion on the matter. As Weiss read the letter, he struggled to find the right words. Lisha became concerned and wondered if she had made some kind of mistake in her writing. Weiss then revealed that the letter resembled a love letter. Lisha's eyes widened in surprise at that realization. Weiss confirmed his observation and pointed to a particular line, which expressed that her passion for him had grown even greater than before they met. Lisha clarified that she had meant every word sincerely. To her, it simply expressed that the boy whose abilities had been widely praised had proven to be even more remarkable when seen in person. Weiss acknowledged her explanation, but he remained concerned that the letter might give the impression of a maiden deeply in love. Lisha reacted with disbelief. Weiss then pointed out additional phrases, including words that praised his valor, bravery, and gallantry, as well as expressions that urged him to speak and not distance himself from her. Lisha insisted that everything written there was the truth. She believed that if someone displayed such remarkable swordsmanship as Len had, anyone would naturally want to spar with him again and again. Weiss pointed out that it still gave the impression of a provincial girl who had just witnessed a hero. Lisha took the letter back from his hands and read through it carefully herself. As she examined the words, she came to understand that Weiss was correct. It truly did resemble a love letter. She sat down and reflected on it. She was accustomed to writing formal administrative letters, and she began to wonder if this had happened because it was her first time writing a personal letter. After thinking it through, she decided that the letter would be discarded once they left the village. Soon, the time for their departure arrived. With their first meeting now concluded, and after having demonstrated her abilities in a striking battle, she quietly departed from the village. However, a sudden gust of wind caught the letter she had intended to throw away and carried it off. At that moment, she had not yet realized that she had lost it. Some time later, Len walked alone through the forest. His attention turned to the demon sword of banditry. He realized that he had not yet tested its ability. He decided that this would be a good opportunity to try practicing with it. He looked up and noticed a bird. He activated the sword's ability on the bird. When he checked the result, he discovered that he had successfully stolen a single feather from it. He then observed the other birds resting on the tree. His attention shifted to something one of them was holding. He used the sword again and stole it. When he examined it, he saw that it was a piece of paper. As he read it, he realized that it was not just an ordinary letter. It was a love letter. Chapter 7. Len wondered who would be trying to invite him to Clausel. As he examined the paper more closely, he realized it was made of high-quality parchment. He thought that if he read it carefully, it might mention the sender's swordsmanship. Then a thought crossed his mind, wondering if it could perhaps be a letter written by Lisha for him, and questioning why it had appeared here. Soon after, Len heard the sound of a galloping horse approaching. When the knights came into view, he quickly realized that they were not part of Waisama's group. His eyes focused on their crest, and he immediately noticed that it was different from Clausel's. This led him to wonder if they were knights from another domain. The knights came to a stop in front of Len. The leading knight addressed him as a young man and asked if he was a subject of the village ruled by the Ashton family. Len acknowledged this and asked himself who they could be. The knight then explained that they had received a message approved by Viscount Givens and had come to deliver it. Because of this, the knight requested that Len guide them to the Ashton family estate. The name Viscount Givens remained in Len's thoughts. As he recalled, there was a domain located just northeast of their land, ruled by nobles who had no relation to the Ashton family. Even so, their rank was higher than that of a baron, and Len understood that he could not ignore them. He accepted the situation and decided that he would lead them to the house. The knight showed a brief reaction upon hearing this. Not long after Lisha had departed, Len found himself wondering what this new matter could be. After some time passed, the knights arrived at the Ashton residence. The knight leader entered the house and delivered the message directly to Sir Roy, while Len and the knights of the Baron remained waiting outside. The leader knight stepped outside the house and approached Len. He revealed that he had not expected Len to be Len Ashton. He conveyed that Len should take pride, as the Viscount had also sent a message intended for him. Len was taken aback at the mention of a message addressed specifically to him. The knight explained that the Viscount held Len's abilities in high regard and expressed the Viscount's desire to employ Len under his residence. Len was left in clear surprise upon hearing this. After those words were spoken, the knight from the Baron's side stepped forward. He expressed an apology and made it known that their lord had been the first to extend an invitation to Len. In response, the leader knight acknowledged that the knight must belong to the Clausel family. He made it clear that a simple invitation did not mean Len had already given his answer, and because of that, he saw no issue in approaching Len as well. The knight serving the Baron answered firmly, pointing out that the issue existed even before that matter. He stated that the village fell under the dominion of the Clausel family. He emphasized that if anyone wished to call upon Len, proper communication with them should come first. He further expressed that regardless of differences in court rank or faction, such conduct was a matter of basic courtesy. He affirmed that any servant of the esteemed Viscount Givens would surely understand this. Len and the surrounding knights fell into silence as the exchange ended. The leader knight eventually acknowledged the point and conveyed that they would correct their conduct. After mounting his horse, the leader knight made it known that they would return at another time. With that, the knights departed from the area. Inside the house, Sir Roy carefully read through the letter. The contents, filled with various reasons and justifications, revealed that the neighboring domain intended to incorporate the village into the Viscount's territory. Sir Roy recognized the meaning behind these words and understood that the waves of factional dispute had finally reached their land. The knight serving the Baron admitted his shame, but he affirmed that Sir Roy's understanding of the situation was entirely correct. The words factional dispute remained in Len's mind as he reflected on their meaning. Within the Leomel Empire, the entire nobility was divided into 3 factions, and every noble belonged to one of them. The first was the Imperial faction. This group held deep reverence for the founder of the nation, the Lion King, and firmly believed that only the Imperial family possessed the right to lead the country. The second was the Hero faction. This faction consisted of nobles whose bloodlines had produced the heroes who once defeated the Demon King. Led by the 7 great noble houses, they were regarded as the central figures in the legend of the 7 heroes. Viscount Givens was also a member of the Hero faction. Many within this faction believed that the authority of the Imperial faction should be restrained. Their vision was to make the Leomel Empire more free and more democratic, while also reducing the gap in wealth between the classes. Finally, there was the Neutral faction. This group was made up of pacifists who disliked conflict and chose to respect both of the major factions. Baron Clausel was among those who belonged to the Neutral faction. Len carefully read through the letter as well. As he considered its contents, he turned his attention to the knight serving the baron and sought to understand whether incorporating a territory into another noble's domain was something that could truly be done with ease. The knight explained that such a situation was rare, especially in border villages. However, he acknowledged that if all parties involved were in agreement, then it was indeed possible. Sir Roy reflected on this and found himself questioning the reason behind such an action. He could not understand the purpose of taking control over a village as small as theirs. The knight admitted that he did not know the exact reason. Still, he suspected that there was some deeper strategy behind the decision. He believed that there must be a clear motive driving such a move. Another knight stepped forward and shared his thoughts on the matter. He explained that many sought to bring the Clausel family into their faction. The Baron was widely recognized as an excellent noble, and the existence of the SAINTESS of White within their domain carried great importance as well. Len felt a quiet heaviness settle within him. In his thoughts, he admitted that he truly did not wish to become involved in a power struggle filled with hidden schemes and political maneuvering. However, since the Ashton family served the Clausel family, they were not entirely separate from these matters. He understood that there was even a possibility that they had already been drawn into something far beyond their expectations. Len continued to reflect, recognizing that he did not know the true intentions of Viscount Givens. Even so, he believed that remaining cautious would not be a mistake. As he kept reading the letter, a particular line caught his attention. He turned his focus toward his father. The letter clearly stated that they intended to incorporate the village and station knights there, claiming it was to compensate for a lack of military strength. Len began to wonder whether this supposed lack of military strength was referring to the incident involving the chief wolven. Sir Roy believed that this was most likely the case. However, he also understood that the incident itself had been highly unusual, something that could even be described as an abnormality. Aside from that single event, there had never been any record suggesting that the Ashton family lacked sufficient military power. The word abnormality remained in Len's thoughts. He recalled what he had once heard from Waisama. If monsters caused damage within a territory, the feudal lord responsible for that land could face punishment if they repeatedly deployed inadequate forces. The knight confirmed that this was indeed true. Protecting the territory was the fundamental duty of the feudal lord. Following that reasoning, Len began to consider the implications. If this village and the surrounding areas were to suffer serious damage, there existed a possibility that the Clausel family themselves could face punishment. As this realization formed in his mind, Len arrived at a troubling conclusion. He began to suspect that this outcome might be exactly what Viscount Givens was aiming to achieve. Len's father's eyes widened as Len continued explaining his thoughts. He struggled to understand the meaning behind Len's reasoning and questioned whether Len was suggesting that Viscount Givens was attempting to frame Baron Clausel by taking advantage of the recent disturbance. Len affirmed this suspicion and began to present an example to support his thinking. Len reasoned that Viscount Givens might present himself as someone protecting the accused Baron, only to use that opportunity to draw him into the hero faction. He also considered a darker possibility. If Viscount Givens had planned such a move from the very beginning and had been preparing it for a long time, then the worst-case scenario would be that even the Chief Wolven incident itself could be connected to Viscount Givens. Sir Roy found this difficult to accept. He felt that such a conclusion might be going too far and sought to clarify whether Len was truly suggesting that Viscount Givens had intentionally unleashed a monster. Len acknowledged that his thoughts might be reaching too deeply into speculation. He recognized that he had no evidence to support such a claim. Even so, he could not ignore that if it were true, then the situation would align with everything that had happened. Sir Roy accepted Len's reasoning but understood the gravity of such a possibility. If it were indeed true, it would lead to a scandal of tremendous scale. The knight admitted honestly that he was shocked by how quickly Len had reached such a conclusion. He revealed that, in truth, the Baron himself had also been troubled by the same possibility. He recognized Len as someone with exceptional intellect. Len responded by grounding his thoughts, understanding that everything he had concluded remained only a guess. He acknowledged that there was little they could do at the present time, and he believed that remaining vigilant was necessary to prevent any unexpected developments. Sir Roy agreed with Len's words and realized that he could not continue remaining confined to his bed. Milieu, however, urged Roy not to push himself beyond his limits. The other knight expressed his intention to report the entire matter to the Baron without delay and to urge him to strengthen their vigilance. Len acknowledged this and entrusted the responsibility to him. In Len's inner thoughts, he reflected on how his position may have changed. Even so, he could not ignore the possibility that he might one day have to stand against the very hero faction that had once been his allies in the legend of the Seven Heroes. He did not know what circumstances had led to such a possibility. As these thoughts lingered, time continued to pass. The seasons shifted gradually, and autumn eventually gave way to winter. After a hunt, within the village, a knight remarked that the day had been another successful hunt. Len agreed and expressed his gratitude for the knight's assistance. Because of their efforts, the village had been able to fully prepare for the coming winter. The knight reflected on Len's abilities, recognizing that his talent continued to impress him each time. He believed that if Len were to go to the imperial capital, he would undoubtedly achieve great success. However, Len remained firm in his resolve, knowing that he would not leave the village as he was the heir of the Ashton family. The knight felt regret at hearing this and became emotional, while another knight stepped in and placed a hand on his shoulder, stopping him from troubling Len further. Later, at the Ashton residence, Len returned home. As he entered, a familiar voice greeted him. His gaze shifted, and he saw Lisha sitting calmly while reading. She informed him that if he was searching for his mother, she was currently with Granny Rig. Len was caught completely off guard, and his reaction caused a sudden loud sound. Lisha was startled by it and reacted to the noise, feeling discomfort from the unexpected sharpness of his voice. Still in shock, Len struggled to understand why Lisha was inside his home. Lisha, in turn, could not understand why he questioned her presence. She made it clear that there was only one possible reason for her being there. Since Len had not gone to Clausel, she had come to this place instead. Chapter 8. After some time, Lisha showed Len how to use the shower and asked whether it was convenient for him. She explained that as a sign of gratitude for their recent sparring match, she had brought him one of her magical tools. It was a crystal orb capable of creating water, meaning Len would no longer need to walk all the way to the river or the well. Len wondered in his thoughts whether that magical tool was powered by magic stones. He acknowledged that it did sound convenient, but he also questioned whether it was expensive. Lisha reassured him not to worry about it. She explained that it was an old item that had stopped working, and she had it repaired using her own pocket money. Lisha then brought up the incident involving Viscount Givens and expressed her apology. She explained that her father had intended to protest, but dealing with nobles of higher rank made it difficult. She added that even as the Saintess of White, her influence was not enough to overcome ranks and political factions. Len found himself questioning that in his mind. Lisha then explained that the so-called Saintess, blessed by the chief deity Elfin, had appeared many times throughout history. However, unlike the 7 heroes, none of them had defeated a demon lord or accomplished anything especially remarkable. Len fell silent. In his thoughts, he realized that although Saintesses were respected, they were not held at the same level as the 7 heroes or the Lion King. Lisha then stated that now that Len had returned, she wanted him to guide her to his father. Inside Roy's room, Lisha began healing Sir Roy. Len recognized the magic she was using as sacred magic. Sir Roy, already feeling his condition improving, showed his gratitude to Lisha, and she accepted it calmly. After leaving the room, Len asked Lisha whether she had also treated him during her previous visit. Lisha admitted that she had and wondered whether he had not heard about it. Len went silent, and in his mind, he felt apologetic for not knowing. Outside the house, Len and Lisha began sparring once again. Len noticed that Lisha's movements were now sharper than before. She had clearly trained hard during that short time. Suddenly, Lisha stumbled. Len caught her and told her to be careful. Her face turned red as she fell silent, and Len checked to see whether she was all right. Lisha suddenly pulled herself away from him. With visible frustration, she questioned how Len was able to move so much without even losing his breath, and how much stamina he truly possessed. Then her mood gradually changed. She admitted that, just as she had thought, the time she enjoyed the most was when she was sparring with Len. A smile formed on her face. She then declared that they would spar again the next morning, and she made it clear that she would not lose next time. And so, Lisha remained there for several days. During that time, she and Len shared several more sparring sessions. Eventually, the day arrived when Lisha had to leave. She said her farewell for now. As Len watched her departing figure, he realized in his thoughts that Lisha truly intended to return. Even so, he believed that getting too close to her might not be a good idea. Winter eventually came to an end, and the next event began to unfold. It was Len's 11th spring since arriving in this world. Meanwhile, Len and his father were returning home from hunting. Len observed that his father's health seemed to have completely recovered. Sir Roy agreed, acknowledging that it was thanks to everyone's care. As they approached their home, they noticed a group of knights standing in front of it. Len quickly realized that they were Viscount Givens' knights once again. The knight leading the group stated that he had been waiting for Sir Roy Ashton. Sir Roy asked what had brought them there this time. The lead knight explained that it was, of course, an invitation for Sir Roy to join them. He added that the Viscount still held his abilities in high regard. He also mentioned that he had brought good news concerning Len. Nearby, Len felt a growing sense of unease. The lead knight then revealed that the Viscount was offering to support Len Ashton's admission into the special class at the prestigious Imperial Cadet Academy. Everyone present was shocked by this announcement. Sir Roy pointed out that even general admission alone was already extremely difficult, and the idea that Len would enter the special class was hard to believe. The lead knight acknowledged their astonishment. He explained that the special class at the Imperial Cadet Academy was exceptional. It was reserved only for the heirs of the 7 great nobles and heroes, those from the general's lineage, and a small number of talented individuals who had been raised in the imperial capital since childhood. The lead knight added that the Viscount held the position of Assistant Minister of Justice. Because of that authority, sending a recommendation letter to the academy would be an easy task for Len. The lead knight then turned his attention toward Len and asked whether he had no desire to develop his talent in the imperial capital. Len declined the offer and expressed his refusal. The lead knight reacted with disbelief and questioned what Len had just said. Len calmly reaffirmed that he had no intention of leaving their village. The knight raised his voice and questioned Len's reasoning. He pressed further, asking whether Len did not wish to become a noble. He emphasized that Len could obtain a noble title as soon as he graduated from the academy. In Len's mind, he had absolutely no desire to go. The Imperial Cadet Academy was a major setting in the legend of the 7 heroes. The special class, in particular, was where the main characters belonged. It was not an exaggeration to believe that enrolling there would bring Len closer to the point in time where the game's events would begin. Len expressed his apology and explained that he already felt fulfilled with his current life in the village. The lead knight remained unable to accept his response and questioned Len's way of thinking. He then turned to Sir Roy and asked whether he truly did not want his son to become a noble. Sir Roy apologized and acknowledged that sending Len to the imperial capital for education and to learn more about the wider world would indeed be beneficial. However, he made it clear that the final decision rested on Len's own will. Sir Roy also expressed the pride he carried in having served the Clausel family for generations. Because of that, he stated that he would write a formal response to the Viscount and entrust it to the knights to deliver when they departed. The lead knight fell silent and closed his eyes. After a moment, he accepted the decision and stated that they would personally deliver Sir Roy's response to the Viscount. He then turned his back and expressed that the outcome was most unfortunate. With that, Viscount Given's envoy departed. A few days later, under circumstances very different from before, Lady Lisha was brought back to their village. This time, she was ill. Len welcomed her third visit. Inside their house, Lisha was being treated. Weiss expressed his apology and explained that the young lady had fallen ill about 3 days earlier. They had been near another village they originally intended to visit. Len asked what exactly had happened. Weiss explained that it was a peculiar illness that only affected children who possessed a high level of magical power. It did not spread to others, and once someone had contracted it, their body would develop a kind of immunity. However, the illness was troublesome because it appeared suddenly without any warning signs. If the patient suffered from a high fever and their immune system weakened, there was a risk of complications that could become fatal. Because of this, Lisha needed to rest for at least 2 to 3 weeks. Len responded by expressing that they should not worry and should take all the time necessary until the young lady fully recovered. After some time, her condition finally stabilized. 3 days later, a woman accompanying Lady Lisha knocked on her door and informed her that Len had arrived. Len entered the room and noticed that Lisha's cheeks were still slightly red. Lisha lowered her head and suddenly apologized. She explained that she had come to their village on her own decision, yet she had fallen ill shortly after arriving. Because of that, Len had ended up taking care of her. Len reassured her that it was not her fault and that he did not mind, and he asked her to lift her head. Lisha refused to accept that it was fine. She explained that this journey had also been meant to show Viscount Givens their determination. They had planned to visit more villages than usual for that reason. Even if her influence was limited as the Saintess, she had wanted to demonstrate that the Clausel family remained united through her presence. Yet she felt frustrated with herself. Len remained silent. In his thoughts, he realized that at her young age, Lisha was already burdened with thoughts about her position and responsibilities. Lisha admitted that in the end, she had been unable to accomplish anything. She acknowledged that she had not managed to defeat Len even once. This only made her feel like an annoying and immature child. She also believed that, as she was now, she was merely tarnishing the reputation of her late mother. Len asked her about her mother. Lisha explained that her mother had been overjoyed when she learned that her daughter was the Saintess of White. Her mother had always believed that she would accomplish great things, and she held on to that belief even on the day she passed away due to illness. Lisha revealed that she had only ever seen her mother's face through portraits and had never heard her voice. Even so, whenever she wore her mother's outfit and fought, she felt as if her mother was cheering her on. She added that it was the same outfit her mother had worn during her own childhood. As Len listened, he realized that the outfit was a precious memento. It was something he had not known before. Lisha admitted that she had wanted to live up to everyone's expectations, but in the end, she felt that her efforts had been meaningless. She then stated that this would be the last time she would come to their village. Len was left in shock by those words. Lisha explained that she had heard about his refusal of the invitation to the Imperial Cadet Academy from Viscount Givens. She acknowledged that Len and his father had gone to great lengths to pledge their loyalty to Clausel. Because of that, she felt that she could no longer continue acting like a spoiled child. She revealed that she had already discussed this matter with Weiss and expressed her sincere apology for the trouble she had caused Len's family. She also expressed her deep gratitude for all the kindness Len had shown her. As Len reflected on her words, he saw her as someone sincere and pure. In contrast, he recognized that he himself was the one carrying secrets. In his thoughts, he wondered whether this truly marked the end. Chapter 9. Lisha stated that she needed to write a letter to her father. She asked if she could borrow some ink later, explaining that she had run out while on her way there. Len gave his approval and explained that the stationery was inside the box on his desk, adding that she was free to use it. Lisha repeated the words, his desk, in uncertainty. Len clarified that the room they were in was actually his room, and that he had only been cleaning the guest room when Lisha arrived. Lisha acknowledged this and expressed that it seemed she had done nothing but cause him trouble. Len immediately denied this and reassured her that it was not the case. Len fell into silence for a moment. Then he brought up a request, asking if she could bring a fire-lighting magic tool the next time she came, mentioning that even a spare one would be fine. Lisha became confused, wondering what he meant. Len explained that he thought having a fire-lighting tool within the domain would be convenient. Lisha told him that this would be her last time coming. Len clarified that he was referring to when Lisha visited again. Lisha told him to listen carefully. She reminded him that she had already said she would not return anymore, because she kept causing him trouble. She also pointed out that Len had been avoiding her and their sparring. Len responded by explaining that anyone would be confused if suddenly asked to spar without warning. He questioned whether Lisha would agree with that reasoning. Len then stated that if Lisha could give him advance notice from now on, it would be fine. He expressed that he could spar with her as long as she was within the village. Lisha was visibly surprised by his words. Len explained that he did not want her condition to worsen, so he would leave for now. He added that they would have a proper conversation once she was feeling better. Lisha remained speechless. Outside the room, Len began to question himself, wondering what exactly he had just said. Meanwhile, Lisha questioned whether Len had truly meant those words. She wondered if she was actually welcome to return. At the same time, she noticed that her headache had begun to fade. She slowly stood up, knowing she needed to write a letter to her father while she still had the strength. As she opened the drawer, she wondered if the ink was inside the box she had seen earlier. As she opened it, she found a sheet of paper and began to read. She quickly realized that the writing on it was the very letter she had written herself. At that moment, she remembered Weiss mentioning that the letter looked like a love letter. Her hand began to tremble. She questioned why the letter was inside Len's room. She had believed that she had lost it. She wondered where Len had found it and came to the conclusion that he must have already read it. Lisha fell to her knees as tears flowed down her face. She rejected the idea in her mind, insisting that the letter was not a love letter. She believed she had only been overly enthusiastic when she wrote it. She convinced herself that it was not because she had feelings for Len. In her thoughts, Len was simply strong and possessed a very likable character, nothing more. After some time, she gradually calmed herself. A new thought surfaced, making her question why Len had kept the letter as if it were something valuable. She believed that he should have simply thrown it away. With that thought lingering, Lisha placed the letter back inside the box. She reflected on whether he had preferred that she would not grow fond of him. She then lay down on the bed once again. Her mind remained fixed on Len, and she wondered what thoughts had passed through him after he read the letter. The following day, at the young lady Lisha's request, Weiss and the others chose to assist with hunting and carpentry. Weiss explained to the Ashtons that they felt obligated to help in return for the hospitality they had received. Sir Roy agreed and stated that he would head into the forest alongside Weiss and his group. He informed Len that he was needed for house repairs. Len accepted without objection. Milieu mentioned that she would go visit Granny Rig to obtain some medicine. One of the knights asked Len about the location of the repair materials. Len informed him that the materials were stored in the storage box near the suspension bridge. As Lisha continued to slowly regain her strength, everyone believed that she would only need another week to fully recover. If everything proceeded smoothly, they would be able to return to Clausel. However, just as those thoughts settled, rain suddenly began to fall, accompanied by a heavy fog. They decided to pause briefly. While standing beneath a tree, Len caught a strange scent. He asked the nearby knight if he could smell it as well. Len noted that the scent resembled that of a field after a controlled burn. The knight responded that he could not distinguish it clearly due to the overpowering smell of wet vegetation. Len began to suspect that the scent was coming from the direction of their house. Without hesitation, he suddenly ran forward at full speed. What he saw next shocked him. Their house was engulfed in flames. Nearby, two knights lay collapsed on the ground. As he looked closer, he realized that parts of one knight's body had been bitten off. The horrifying sight made him question whether a monster was responsible. In that moment, Len suddenly realized that Lisha was still inside the room. Without hesitation, he ran toward the burning house. As he entered, he saw that all the knights who had remained behind to guard had already been killed. A troubling thought crossed his mind, making him question whether this had been planned in advance. He wondered if the attackers had taken advantage of a brief moment of vulnerability. Then, a cloaked figure came into view, accompanied by two dragon-like creatures. The sight stunned him. He immediately recognized the creatures as mana-eaters, powerful monsters classified as D-rank. Len spotted Lisha and rushed forward, determined to save her. The cloaked figure addressed him, identifying him as Len Ashton. Len demanded that the figure stay away from Lisha. Suddenly, Len felt something strange happening to his body. Confusion overtook him as his strength began to fade. His knees gave out beneath him, and his vision became distorted. He found himself unable to gather any strength at all. The cloaked man revealed the source of it, presenting an incense. He explained that it was potent enough to put even a dragon into a deep sleep for several days. Len realized the danger too late. His consciousness began to slip away, and darkness consumed him. After some time, Len regained awareness. He noticed that his hands and feet were tightly bound. Disoriented, he questioned where he had been taken. Then he saw Lisha beside him, also restrained. He called out to her, trying to confirm her condition. Lisha remained unconscious, but Len felt relieved when he saw that she was still breathing. The cloaked man expressed surprise that Len had already awakened. He revealed that the incense should have kept him asleep for 4 days. He warned Len to remain obedient if he wished to avoid harm, instructing him to endure for a few more days and to avoid attempting anything reckless. Len was shocked upon realizing that 4 days had already passed. His thoughts turned to the village, and he wondered how far they had been taken. He also questioned the reason behind their abduction. He began to analyze the situation, concluding that the man was most likely a beast tamer, someone capable of summoning and controlling monsters. The fact that he could command 2 D-rank monsters made it clear that he was not an opponent Len could confront carelessly. As Len looked at Lisha, his concern deepened. He recognized that her condition was worsening. He understood that if more time passed, her life would be at risk. Within his mind, he formed a firm resolve. He could not allow her to die in that place. He decided that he would save her, no matter what. Chapter 10. Len had a dream. In that dream, Len Ashton was someone who did not have the courage to go and gather herbs. Because of that hesitation, he lost his father, who had fought the chief wolven and died right before his eyes. After his father's death, their village was attacked by something, and many people lost their lives. He called out for his mother. He apologized to her. He had promised to protect her, yet he had failed. In that hopeless moment, Lisha appeared together with the knights and saved the village. Her presence resembled nothing less than that of a true saintess. Lisha healed his mother. He wondered if that scene was his past, just as told in the legend of the 7 heroes. In the present, while they remained bound and restrained, Len questioned whether their encounter had originally been meant to happen that way. He did not understand why he had seen that dream, but at least it showed that they did not seem to share a hostile relationship. He questioned why he had to take Lisha's life. He wondered if there had been some special reason behind it. Along the road, Len noticed that the carriage had stopped. The hooded figure stepped down and opened their door, then gave them water and food. Len demanded that the chain on his hand be unlocked. The hooded man refused and treated the request as foolish, telling him to deal with it himself. He reminded Len that he had already provided potions and herbs over the past few days and made it clear that he had no intention of giving him any further comfort. He also informed Len that shouting would accomplish nothing, as the magic tool he possessed allowed only him to hear any sound coming from inside. After closing the carriage, the hooded man remained outside to rest. Len opened the water using his mouth and handed it to Lisha, carefully pouring some water into her mouth. When night came and everything fell silent, Len waited patiently. He summoned the demon sword of metal into his hand, and the moment it appeared, it cut through the chain binding his hand. He was surprised by its sharpness, seeing how easily it broke the restraint. Len then slid the tip of the sword toward the lock on the carriage door. He managed to open it and carried Lisha as he escaped. The monster flying above noticed their escape, then descended and landed nearby. Len used his metal sword and destroyed the carriage. The hooded man awoke from his rest. The sound echoed throughout the forest. Len threw his metal sword toward the hooded man. The hooded man avoided it, confused, unable to understand where Len had obtained such a weapon. A gem loosened from the hooded man. The metal sword struck the tree where the horse had been tied, and the horse was freed. Len summoned the demon sword of wood. He used natural magic against the approaching monster, and vines and grass surged forward, wrapping around it and restraining its movements. He directed the same magic toward the hooded man, and the vines quickly tangled around him as well. The hooded man recognized it as natural magic. The gem was carried along by the moving vines, and Len retrieved it using his sword. Still holding Lisha in his arms, Len leaped onto the horse. The hooded man declared that Len would not escape. In response, Len summoned the demon sword of banditry and used its power to steal the staff from the hooded man. The hooded man became confused, unable to understand what had just happened or what it meant. As Len rode the horse, it refused to cooperate and resisted his control. Len pleaded with the horse, urging it to listen to him. Another flying mana eater approached them. As it closed in, the horse struck it with a powerful kick. After that, they continued riding away. The hooded man managed to free himself from the vines and recognized the power as something unusual, yet he declared that he would not allow Len Ashton to escape. Marks appeared on both of his arms. He spread his arms and spoke an incantation, calling upon the beasts of the forest. In response, the forest stirred violently, and monsters began to emerge, rushing toward Len. Len realized that the hooded man was gathering the monsters of the forest. He understood that the hooded man should only be capable of commanding creatures weaker than himself, and Len recognized that this was the hooded man's ability. Len summoned the demon sword of metal and struck the monsters that approached too closely. As they created distance from the others, another flying mana eater approached. It released flames toward them, but they managed to escape and continued riding away. Meanwhile, in the northern town of Clausel, Lisha's father, Lizard Clausel, cried out in disbelief upon learning that his daughter had been kidnapped. Weiss lowered his head deeply and admitted that his failure was beyond forgiveness. He had left the young lady's side and allowed such a grave outcome to occur. He accepted full responsibility and declared that he would bear all punishment in place of the fallen men. Weiss asked Lizard to grant him a little more time so that he could rescue the young lady. Lizard remained silent. He closed his eyes and lowered his head, then told Weiss that he did not doubt his loyalty. He pointed out that it had been Lisha's own command that caused Weiss to leave her side, and because of that, he could not place blame on him. Lizard then declared that they had no time to hesitate. He ordered Weiss to contact the imperial capital and instructed him to inform the nobles of their faction, as well as the emperor himself, about the incident. Soon after, a man entered the room and informed Lord Lizard that it was urgent, as visitors from the imperial capital had arrived. Lizard felt confusion at the unexpected report and went to meet them. One of the men confirmed Lizard's identity. He then informed him that they had come on behalf of the Minister of Justice. He declared that Lizard was now under scrutiny for conspicuous negligence in his administration, negligence that had led to the spread of monster-related harm into the neighboring territory of Viscount Givens. Chapter 11. After that night in the forest, Len and Lisha managed to escape and reach safety. Len helped Lisha rest beneath a tree and gave her a medicinal herb. He told her that it was quite bitter but effective in reducing fever. Lisha ate the herb, and the bitterness showed clearly on her face. Len then offered her water, and she drank it. They crossed rivers with Len carrying Lisha, and they continued traveling across mountains. Len observed that Lisha's fever had already subsided. Lisha agreed and asked where he had obtained those herbs. Len explained that he had acquired them in exchange for monster materials he had gathered in the village forest they had passed 3 days earlier. He had also received some travel supplies during that exchange. Lisha expressed her gratitude, and Len told her there was no need to mention it. Soon after, Lisha realized that they had reached the outskirts of Viscount Givens' territory. Len asked how she was able to tell. Lisha pointed toward the Balder Mountains. She explained that once those mountains came into view, their location could be roughly determined, and she told him that she would be able to guide them from there. Len looked at the mountains and recognized them as the Balder Mountains. He wondered if that was not the same place where the final battle had taken place in the Legend of the Seven Heroes. Len asked how many days it would take to reach Clausel from their current location. Lisha answered that it would take about 4 days. She also said that they should first confirm the safety of Len's family. Len told her not to worry about them, explaining that they had not been home on the day of the attack. He believed they had likely taken shelter somewhere safe. He remained certain that they were unharmed and told her not to be concerned. Len then said that this would also be a good opportunity to visit Clausel, where he intended to meet the Baron. For now, he planned for them to look around briefly before returning. Lisha looked at him and expressed her thanks. That night, rain fell across the forest, and they stopped at a nearby cave. Len built a bonfire to keep them warm and prepared a bird. Lisha asked if it was meant for their dinner and wondered how he had managed to catch it. Len explained that he had trapped it using vines while it had been perched on a tree. Lisha asked if he had done it with the help of the mysterious sword, the wooden sword. Len confirmed it and stated that the true nature of its power remained a secret. Lisha found that unfair. While checking through the bag, Lisha took out the gem and asked what it was. She wondered if it was a magic tool, noting that it appeared to be broken. Len explained that he had taken it while escaping from the beast tamer. Lisha repeated her question about whether it was a magic tool. Len recalled that the beast tamer had mentioned using a magic tool to soundproof the carriage, and he believed that the gem was most likely that very tool. Lisha examined the gem closely and thought that it could indeed be the same item. She considered that, if necessary, it could serve as evidence. The next morning, they resumed their journey. Along the way, They found a river where they were able to wash their clothes and rest. Len took a piece of cloth, soaked it with water, and gently wiped Lisha's face. Lisha remembered that Len had told her they would have a proper conversation once she had recovered. Len noticed that Lisha's face was still red. He reached out and touched her forehead, confirming that her fever had already subsided. Lisha blushed and quickly insisted that she was fine and that there was nothing wrong. Her thoughts drifted to what Len must have felt after reading her letter. Then she asked him if she could ask something. She confronted him about hiding something from her. Len reacted with confusion, unable to understand what she meant. Lisha pressed further, questioning why he had kept that item inside his box. Len remained puzzled and asked what she was referring to. Lisha refused to explain further, believing that Len already knew what she meant. Len wondered how he was supposed to know which item she was talking about and began thinking about whether he had anything unusual in his room. His thoughts turned to his earlier conversation with her mother, who had questioned why he was collecting magic stones. She had pointed out that an emptied magic stone would not even sell for a good price. He explained that he was not collecting the magic stones for any particular reason, but simply because they looked interesting to him, so he kept them. Her mother had commented that it must run in the blood, since his father had been the same way when he was young, always speaking about swords and magic stones even during moments they spent together. Len began to wonder if Lisha had been referring to those magic stones. He did have many of them in his room, and he considered that it might appear to be a strange hobby, especially from a woman's point of view. Len then looked at Lisha and told her that ever since he first saw it, it had remained in his thoughts. Lisha blushed, caught off guard by his words. She repeated the idea in her mind, trying to understand what he meant. She wondered what exactly Len was referring to. Len affirmed that it was true, and that it was the only way he could describe it. Lisha believed that she herself had remained in Len's thoughts. She felt that it was unfair for him to present something like that so suddenly. Len explained that it felt strange to keep holding on to something simply out of curiosity. Lisha responded that it was not particularly strange and told him that he could do whatever he wanted with it. Len thought that she might be uncomfortable because the stones came from monsters. He apologized and admitted that they genuinely fascinated him. Lisha responded that she already understood and wanted him to stop bringing it up repeatedly. She found herself unsure of how to respond when he expressed it in that way. Len looked at her, and she told him to simply use her name. Len did not immediately understand, and Lisha repeated that if he had to, he should just call her by her name. Len accepted this, and it became clear that they were not understanding each other in the same way. Meanwhile, in a nearby village, Len brought out the body of a dead boar to exchange for supplies. The elderly woman there did not have any medicinal herbs to offer, but Len accepted it and said that having food would already be enough to help them. The old woman asked where they were headed. Len told her that they were traveling without a fixed destination and had not yet decided where to go. She informed him that if they continued straight from there, they would eventually reach Clausel. Len asked if something was happening there. The old woman replied that something indeed was occurring. She mentioned that, according to an adventurer who had recently passed through, the Baron of Clausel would soon face punishment. She added that it was bound to become an eventful situation. Lisha's eyes widened in shock upon hearing this. She demanded to know why and what had happened. The old woman admitted that she was not certain, but rumors claimed that the Baron of Clausel had instigated monsters against Viscount Given's territory. After hearing this, Len and Lisha hurriedly mounted their ride and departed. Lisha could not understand why her father would ever do such a thing. She believed that the story had to be fabricated and found it impossible to accept. The situation felt deeply strange to her no matter how she considered it. In the northern city of Clausel, a horse carriage arrived, drawing the attention of those nearby as they watched. A man stepped out from the carriage. A knight greeted the Viscount and acknowledged that the moment had finally come. He recognized that once they gained control over Clausel's territory, the influence of the hero faction would expand without question. The man was Viscount Givens, and he declared his intention to bring down the Clausels first, believing it necessary for Leomel to rise from its state of decline. Chapter 12. The two opposing sides stood facing each other inside the trial court, their presence heavy with tension. The man presiding over the proceedings stated that, based on the arguments that had been presented, the imperial court would carefully review the matter in accordance with the great imperial law. He further declared that the official announcement would be made the following morning, at the same time the hearing had begun that day. On the opposing side, Baron spoke with certainty, convinced that the outcome was already clear. He believed that within a few days, he would be taken to the imperial city and subjected to punishment. Weiss responded to this, explaining that they could submit an appeal against the verdict and bring the case to a trial in the imperial city. He also mentioned that if that effort failed, they could still request a goodwill trial as a final option. Baron, however, believed that such efforts would be meaningless. From the expression on Viscount Given's face, it was obvious to him that enough preparations had already been made to secure victory. He felt certain that, under the current circumstances, interference would likely occur even before the trial could properly begin. This situation struck Baron as deeply unusual. Even among members of higher nobility, such methods felt excessively forceful. He could not help but question whether this was truly nothing more than a simple factional dispute. Later that night, deep within the forest, Lisha and Len rested in silence. Len found himself unable to calm his thoughts. He wondered how he could possibly save everyone. If events continued on their current path, Baron Clausel would be falsely accused and stripped of his power. According to Lisha, however, the neutral high-ranking nobles could not be depended upon for support. Lisha eventually stirred and noticed that Len was still awake. She realized he could not sleep. Len admitted that he had simply been thinking, troubled by the situation and wondering if there was anything he could do. She told him that he did not need to be so formal and could speak more casually. Len found himself confused by this sudden suggestion. She explained that speaking casually would make it easier for them to talk, and in return, she would simply call him Len. Lisha then stated that they would depart as soon as dawn arrived. She admitted that she also could not sleep under these circumstances. It was necessary for them to return to Clausel as quickly as possible so that they could testify about the kidnapping. Len fell silent after hearing this. His thoughts grew heavier as he wondered how many people would truly believe their story. Ideally, they would need clear evidence that directly connected the kidnapping to Viscount Givens. Lisha agreed with the urgency of the situation. She understood that they did not have much time and that it was necessary to find something that could help them. By morning, they resumed their journey. Lisha explained that they were already close. They had moved far away from the main road, but once they passed through the forest and crossed the hills ahead, Clausel would finally come into view. Len wondered if that meant they were now safe. Lisha believed that they should be, as knights from House Clausel were expected to be stationed nearby. Before they could continue further, a horse suddenly approached from ahead. As it drew closer, they recognized the rider as a knight serving Viscount Givens. The knight expressed relief at having found them. He explained that they had been searching for both of them under orders from Baron Clausel. Lisha felt confused by this claim. Soon after, several more knights appeared and surrounded them. The leading knight stated that they needed to leave immediately and that they would escort them to a safe location. Len and Lisha became cautious at once. Lisha quietly told Len to leave the situation to her, knowing that their circumstances could quickly become dangerous. Len quietly expressed his understanding and affirmed his readiness to face whatever might happen next. The leading knight noticed their quiet exchange and asked what they had been discussing. Lisha responded that their decision on whether to accompany them would depend on the explanation provided by the leading knight. Lisha then took out the gem and presented it to the knight, asking if he recognized it. The knight's eyes widened slightly, yet he claimed that he did not recognize it and questioned what it was. Lisha noticed the subtle twitch in his eyebrows at that moment. She then explained that the object was a magical device they had taken from the person responsible for kidnapping them. The knight acknowledged this calmly. Lisha observed that he did not appear particularly interested. He then expressed his desire to take possession of the device as evidence. Lisha refused and stated that she intended to have the Merchants Guild examine it instead. The knight showed signs of concern at her refusal. Lisha explained that the Merchants Guild would be able to investigate its origins, including identifying the merchant who sold it or anyone who had previously possessed it. Any information obtained through such an investigation could prove valuable. The knight insisted that such a thing was impossible. He questioned whether she truly understood how many magical devices existed within the Leomel Empire. Lisha acknowledged that point but remained firm in her reasoning. She believed that this particular device was undoubtedly valuable. Unlike the ordinary magical tools commonly circulated in the market, this one was rare, and because of that, someone would likely recognize it. She also relied on her connection with the guild leader in the capital, trusting that through that connection, they would be able to uncover meaningful information. The knight grew uneasy upon hearing this. Lisha continued, explaining that once the origin of the device was uncovered, it would become clear whether it had been stolen or deliberately given. She reasoned that if it turned out someone had willingly provided the device, then regardless of the circumstances, that person would be required to answer for it in court. The leading knight became visibly nervous as this possibility was laid out. Lisha added that whoever had given the device had effectively attempted to frame them and damage their reputation. She directed this point toward the leading knight, expecting him to understand the seriousness of such an act. The surrounding knights fell silent. After a brief pause, the leading knight stated that this matter was extremely important and urged them to entrust the device to his custody. Lisha refused without hesitation. She regarded his demand as foolish and made it clear that she had no obligation to hand over the device. She reminded him that they were within their own territory, and that even the village where the kidnapping had occurred fell under their authority. The knight's frustration intensified, his composure beginning to falter. Lisha declared that the discussion was over. She expressed that she had no desire to be protected by knights who could not understand reason, and she refused to continue the conversation any further. As Lisha and Len began to leave, the leading knight shouted in frustration, insisting that they required an escort. Lisha rejected this, pointing out that they were already close to the city and that she trusted no one but Len to protect her. The leading knight's anger became unmistakable. He refused to allow them to leave. After offering an apology, he unsheathed his sword and forced the matter, making it clear that they had no choice but to accompany them. He launched his attack. Lisha called out to Len. Len stepped forward without hesitation, ready to face the threat. At that exact moment, Len summoned the demon metal sword and raised it, intercepting the incoming strike. He immediately countered, striking the knight's armored hand. In response, the knight reached out and seized Len's cloak. Lisha expressed her gratitude for Len's protection after the knight had laid his hand on them. She then gathered holy magic into her hand, its energy forming with clarity and purpose. She recognized that this act provided them with further grounds to bring Viscount Givens before the court. With resolve, she released the holy magic toward the knight. The force struck him directly, throwing him from his horse. The leading knight, now on the ground, immediately ordered the other knights to prevent their escape. In response, Len summoned the demon sword of wood. Drawing upon natural magic, he unleashed its power toward the knights. Roots and vines emerged from the ground and coiled tightly around them, binding their bodies and restricting their movements. Without wasting a moment, Lisha and Len began to run, moving as fast as they could to put distance between themselves and their pursuers. Behind them, the leading knight forced himself back onto his feet. His anger was clear as he cursed and ordered the others to pursue them. He declared that this incident had to be reported to the Viscount. He then commanded the knights to capture both of them alive, no matter what it took. Chapter 13. Night eventually fell over them as the chase continued. Darkness spread across the land, yet the pursuit did not slow. The knights steadily closed the distance between them. One of the knights declared with certainty that Len and Lisha would not escape. Len and Lisha pushed forward, but they could not shake off their pursuers. Lisha leaned closer to the horse and pleaded for it to endure just a little longer. She knew that if they could make it past the hill ahead, they would soon reach areas where people lived. Nearby, atop a tall pillar of rock, a figure rested in stillness. Len noticed the presence immediately. It was the beast tamer. The beast tamer revealed that he had expected the two of them to pass through this very place. Len was overcome with disbelief at the encounter. Without delay, the beast tamer cast his spell. The surrounding rocks began to shift and rise into the air, floating under his control. The environment itself became hostile. Strange creatures emerged, figures resembling mushrooms and grass shaped like humans, along with swarms of rats. They surrounded Len and Lisha, trapping them within the conjured chaos. Lisha urged Len to hand her a sword as well, requesting the one he used to create fire. Behind them, two of the pursuing knights were suddenly overwhelmed by the swarm of rats. The creatures attacked relentlessly, devouring them. The timing could not have been worse for those knights. The beast tamer declared that surrender would be useless to suggest, knowing they would refuse. Because of that, he had chosen to use force. He made it clear that if even that failed, he would have no choice but to kill them. Large bees began circling Len and Lisha, their presence threatening and relentless. Len used natural magic against the bees, disrupting their movement and weakening them. At the same time, Lisha struck down the remaining creatures with her sword. Len noticed her skill and realized her strength had grown once again. Lisha's improvement was clear, the result of intense training. Together, they continued to eliminate the creatures surrounding them. Despite their efforts, Len could hardly believe the situation they were trapped in. It became clear to him that escape was impossible unless they defeated the beast tamer himself. Then, something massive appeared before them. A giant worm emerged, its enormous body towering and threatening. Len immediately summoned the demon sword of metal once more. With precision, Len pointed the blade directly toward the worm's open mouth. Light gathered along the sword, forming into a concentrated ray. In a single decisive motion, the light extended forward, cutting through the massive creature and splitting it cleanly in half. Lisha watched in surprise, realizing that Len had also grown stronger. Ahead of them, the beast tamer rose to his feet and slowly removed his hood. He acknowledged the power behind Len's attack, recognizing the force capable of sending the pressure of a sword strike across such a distance. At last, the beast tamer revealed his face. Len's expression changed instantly as he saw him. Shock overtook him as recognition set in. He understood exactly who stood before him. The beast tamer was Yurku. Chapter 14. Yurku the Beast Tamer. He was one of the bosses who appeared in the Legend of the Seven Heroes 1. The natural magic he wielded brought Len a fair amount of pain. However, as an adventurer who roamed across the entire continent, Len was not meant to defeat him yet, not until after enrolling in the Imperial Cadet Academy. Len questioned what Yurku was doing in this place. Yurku had always possessed a cruel disposition. He had killed many of his fellow elves and, because of that, had been cast out from his homeland. As punishment for killing his own brethren, both of his arms were restrained by a powerful magic seal. If not for the aid of his staff, his stats would normally be reduced to such a degree that he would not even be able to use 2 skills at once. Len considered that the reason Yurku had not attacked him with his natural magic might be because Len had broken the staff when he fled before. He also supposed that Yurku may have been hired by discount givens, and that perhaps the price offered to him was information on how to remove the seal. Meanwhile, the swarm of monsters continued piling up, surrounding Len and Lisha from all sides. Lisha asked Len if he truly believed he could defeat Yurku, and stated that depending on his answer, she would need to change tactics. Len repeated the word tactics in confusion. On the other side, the chief wolven was still present, along with 2 D-rank monsters of equal strength. Len admitted honestly that if those 2 charged at them, victory could be pushed far beyond their reach. Lisha responded with a faint smirk, expressing that she was glad to hear that, and reminded him that she was the White Saintess. Her sword began to glow brightly, and an ethereal white light formed around them, encircling their figures. Len's chest began to glow with a bright white light as well. He held his sword firmly, and as energy flowed into his hand, he swung his blade multiple times. With monsters surrounding them, each swing released flashes of light that shattered the monsters where they stood. Yurku recognized the power as sacred magic. Beside Len, Lisha offered a prayer through her sword just as one of the Mana Eater stars approached them and unleashed a stream of flames toward them. As the flames closed in, Lisha raised her hand and blocked the attack. In that instant, Len saw an opening and swung his sword, the force of the strike cutting through the Mana Eater's wing. With Lisha at his side, Len believed they would be able to overcome this situation. In front of them, a swarm of rats gathered and formed into worm-like shapes as they moved toward them. Lisha remained confident, believing that with Len beside her, victory was certain. Len struck the swarm of rats with his sword, and the creatures burned as the sacred energy consumed them. Len declared his intent to finish it here. As they closed the distance between themselves and Yurku, Len fixed his eyes on him. He pointed his sword forward and thrust it straight ahead, piercing through Yurku. The Mana Eater moved to block the strike, yet the blade still reached Yurku as well. Len's eyes widened. The Mana Eater let out a painful scream as it flew straight through them, and both Len and Lisha were thrown off the horse. Their bodies hit the ground hard. Yurku was bleeding. The stone pillar where he had been standing burst apart, scattering debris. The scene was devastating. The monsters had been killed, and the horse fled from the chaos. Len immediately went to Lisha and checked her condition. He believed that the sacred magic had been too much for her to endure, especially on top of her illness. Yurku stepped forward while holding his wound, blood continuing to spill from his body. He looked down at his hand, then began to laugh. He spoke of the blood, noting how much of it had poured out from his own body. After waiting all this time to undo the seal placed upon him, he revealed that all he had wanted was to kill as many people as possible. Frustration filled him as he realized that now, he could not kill anyone. He wondered if this was truly the end, if he would no longer be able to take lives. Yurku opened his eyes and looked at Lisha, refusing to accept defeat, declaring that he could still continue. He reflected on how the sight of people's faces at the brink of death always filled him with an indescribable ecstasy, a pleasure that surpassed even the peak of physical intimacy. Len questioned what Yurku was trying to do. Nearby, a fallen Mana Eater began to rise once more. Yurku gave the command, ordering it to devour his arm. Chapter 15. Yurku ordered the Mana Eater to devour his entire arm. The creature obeyed without hesitation. Len stood frozen as he watched the grotesque sight unfold. Yurku laughed in madness, admitting that it hurt, that the pain was enough to drive him into despair. As the Mana Eater consumed his arm, its body began to change. It expanded, growing larger and more distorted, transforming into something far more dreadful. Flesh twisted, limbs thickened, and its presence became heavier with every passing second. A chain suddenly burst from Yurku's chest, locking him in place. He muttered about a wretched seal, questioning whether sacrificing his arm had not been enough. The ground trembled as a withered tree forced its way upward beside him. Yurku murmured that this must be the end and that he had no regrets. In the next instant, a sharp object pierced through his body. The Mana Eater continued evolving, swelling into its final, monstrous form. A potion caught in the branches of the withered tree shattered, spilling its contents over Yurku. He smiled faintly, remarking that it was such an expensive potion, yet that was all it could offer. He admitted again that it hurt. The transformation completed. The Mana Eater stood towering and enormous. Len quickly carried Lisha away from the center of destruction and set her down at a safer distance. He raised his sword, steadying himself. Yurku, still barely breathing, gave one final command, ordering the Mana Eater to kill them both. Len rushed forward first, but the creature vanished in an instant. It reappeared at his side and struck without warning. Len was thrown violently across the ground. The Mana Eater leapt high and brought its feet down toward him, but Len rolled away just in time. The creature's tail whipped through the air and struck him cleanly, sending him flying again. As Len struggled to rise, he realized this was not the strength of the Yerku he once knew. The Mana Eater roared ferociously and advanced. Nearby, Lisha regained consciousness and saw the overwhelming scene before her. The creature lunged again and released a crushing force that struck Len directly, hurling him back. It began walking toward him, step by heavy step. At the same time, Yerku spoke about how this was what killing truly meant. He called it his final ecstasy. Lisha moved closer to Len. She closed her eyes, and a soft glow formed at her fingertips. Light flowed gently into Len's body, restoring his strength and bringing him back to awareness. She held his hand and expressed gratitude for how he had always protected her, even when she believed herself selfish. Len looked at her. She gave him a small smile and urged him to leave, insisting that at least he should continue living. The Mana Eater raised its foot high above them. Len refused. He would never consider leaving her behind. As the creature stomped downward, Len surged upward and struck with all his strength, blocking the crushing foot. The Mana Eater pressed down with its full weight, but Len resisted. The ground cracked beneath him as he forced the limb back. The creature lost balance and fell backward. Len's metal sword slipped from his hand as he collapsed beside Lisha once more. The Mana Eater stood again. At that moment, Len's bracelet began to glow. He noticed the strange light and felt something unfamiliar stirring within him. In the middle of the chaos, he sensed the presence of a new demon sword. The Mana Eater closed in and raised its massive hand to strike the final blow. Len shouted with unwavering resolve. He would do anything so long as it meant protecting Lisha. A new sword materialized in his hand, shining with an intense radiance. Len stared at it in shock, while Yerku watched from a distance in disbelief. The blade released a blinding burst of light that pierced straight through the Mana Eater's enormous body. The creature froze for a brief second before the light tore through it completely. Its body exploded from within, and it screamed in agony as it perished. Yerku witnessed the impossible. He could not understand how such power existed. The same overwhelming light reached him, and he was banished by its force. A massive radiance spread outward from the sword, visible across the entire forest. Trees and earth were illuminated by its brilliance. When the light slowly faded, Len stood there holding the glowing blade. He looked at it in silence, questioning what kind of power he had just awakened. Chapter 16. In the Clausel territory, news about Baron Clausel was finally being sent to the imperial capital. It was still early in the morning, and only a few days had passed since the trial had ended. The entire matter felt like a performance. The Viscount had previously assisted the Minister of Justice and had likely arranged matters behind the scenes. The scene shifted to the streets, where knights marched in formation while escorting Baron Clausel. They were led by Viscount Givens. Some of the knights remarked that the time was nearly at hand. Now that the transfer had been completed, the remaining matters could be entrusted to the royalist faction within the capital. One of the knights turned to Viscount Givens and questioned why he was so focused on Len Ashton. He noted that he could understand the usefulness of Lisha Clausel, but Len was only a countryside knight. Viscount Givens reacted with a faint smirk at the phrase, mere knight. He remarked that such words were likely what everyone believed. The knight pressed him for clarification. Viscount Givens explained that some time ago, he had come across a certain piece of information. He believed that if he could gain control over Len Ashton, or even the Ashton family, the Givens name would rise in influence within the hero faction. The knights were visibly surprised and asked how such a thing could be possible. Viscount Givens responded that they would understand in time. Until then, he alone needed to know the truth. He then shifted his attention to a more urgent matter, the incident that had taken place in the forest. He mentioned the light he had seen the previous night and considered that if it had truly been the power of SAINTESS Lisha, then it was possible that something had happened to Yerku. The knight reported that he had sent several men to investigate the scene during the night, and by now they should have already apprehended those responsible. Viscount Givens answered that he certainly hoped so, otherwise it would become a serious inconvenience for him. He then instructed his knight not to bring them further disgrace. His expression grew more stern as he acknowledged that they were only slightly ahead of the royalist faction in influence, and that failure could not be allowed. The knight gave his agreement. At the entrance gate, Viscount Givens noticed a figure approaching from a distance. Those present waited until the person came into clear view. Weiss was the first to recognize them. He saw Lady Lisha and Len and immediately ran toward them. Lisha's father called out to her and tried to move closer, but a knight blocked his path. Weiss felt relief upon seeing that she was safe. Lisha assured him that she was fine and indicated that they would speak later. For the moment, she did not wish for Len's efforts to be wasted. Lisha then turned her attention to Viscount Givens and confirmed who he was. Viscount Givens expressed that it was an honor to meet Lady Lisha, the Saintess, and reminded her to be mindful of her tone. Lisha responded sharply, stating that she had no manners to offer to a criminal. Viscount Givens reacted with irritation and told her not to twist the situation, insisting that the true criminal was her father. Lisha held his gaze steadily. Viscount Givens quietly observed Lisha and thought that although she was maintaining a firm expression, her exhaustion was obvious. It was clear to him that she must have struggled greatly just to arrive there. From what he had heard, Lisha was still very young. Her body seemed to be at its limit, barely managing to remain conscious. Lisha paused and took a slow breath. She then revealed the item she had been holding and confronted Viscount Givens with it, challenging whether he could still remain confident after seeing it. Viscount Givens asked what it was that she held. Lisha explained that it was a magic tool that belonged to the elf the Viscount had hired. She stated that once the matter was properly investigated, his connection to Yerkel would inevitably come to light. Viscount Givens maintained his confident demeanor and remarked that he had briefly thought he might be in trouble. He expressed disbelief that someone of Lisha's standing would make such unfounded claims. Lisha then stated that she and Len's entire village had been attacked by the very elf he had employed. Viscount Givens questioned what possible reason he would have to do such a thing. He dismissed the idea that she was seriously claiming that a single magic tool could serve as proof of his crimes. Lisha grew angered and clarified that she was not claiming it as final proof, but that the truth would be revealed once a proper investigation was conducted. She added that they had also been attacked in the nearby forest by one of his knights. Viscount Givens continued to hold his composure and suggested that it might have been an impostor. Lisha pointed directly at a knight among them, stating that she clearly remembered his face. She asserted that he had drawn his sword against her and Len. The knight showed visible nervousness. Viscount Givens turned toward him and questioned whether the accusation was true. The knight denied it and claimed that he had only been issuing commands from outside the forest under Viscount Givens' orders. Viscount Givens then concluded that Lisha must have been deceived by someone. Lisha responded that the truth would soon become clear. To verify her claim, she stated that it would be best to bring the matter before her town and discuss it there. Viscount Givens dismissed the suggestion, stating that there would be no need for such action. At that moment, Weiss stepped forward and addressed him. As a knight serving under House Clausel, he expressed that he believed Lady Lisha's claim deserved careful examination. Viscount Givens' tone turned threatening as he declared that such steps were unnecessary. He warned Weiss that if he insisted on pressing accusations, he might find himself facing a new tribunal at the imperial capital. Weiss reacted with visible anger. Len then stepped in and demanded that the knight show his hands. Viscount Givens questioned whom Len was addressing. Len made it clear that he was speaking to Viscount Givens' knight. Chapter 17. Lisha stepped behind Len and stood firmly at his back. She directed her attention to the knight and demanded that he reveal the back of his hand. She stated that it should bear the wound that she and Len had inflicted on him earlier. The knight grew visibly uneasy and struggled to respond. Weiss moved closer to him and instructed him to show it. The knight trembled and turned toward Viscount Givens, his unease clear. Weiss spoke again, stating that he would ask one final time for the knight to reveal his hand. The knight, frustrated, insisted that there had been a misunderstanding and claimed that the wound had come from work. Weiss's expression hardened. He fixed his gaze on the knight and ordered him to show it immediately, warning that he would cut off the knight's hand and reveal it himself if necessary. The knight had no choice. The crowd behind them waited in tense silence. Slowly he removed his gloves. A bandage was wrapped around his hand. Weiss observed that it appeared the knight had not used a proper potion. He stated that the injury was clearly a cut made by a sword. He noted the white burn marks as well, explaining that they resembled burns caused by sacred magic. He further pointed out that regardless of the quality of potion used, wounds inflicted by sacred magic always left a temporary scar. The knight became more unsettled. Viscount Givens stared at him, his own composure disturbed for a brief moment. Then Viscount Givens let out a laugh and declared that, in order to prove his knight's innocence, it was all the more reason to establish a new tribunal. The Viscount's expression shifted without warning, and his temper rose. He declared that everything would be made clear at the imperial capital, under the authority of the Grand Imperial Law. He stated that the first trial had already concluded and that there would be no change in the decision to transfer Baron Clausel. Silence fell over everyone present. Lisha insisted that it could not be. The Viscount then announced that the farce was over and gave his farewell. As the procession resumed its march, Lisha's emotions surfaced. She reached out her hand toward her father, uncertainty pressing on her as she struggled to think of what she should do next. A sudden clap of hands broke the stillness and drew everyone's attention. A man stepped forward and addressed the gathering. He praised the scene before him as truly excellent. He commended Lisha's courage and her noble dignity, stating that he had never witnessed a more beautiful story and that such feelings filled his chest at that very moment. Viscount Givens demanded to know the man's identity, and Lisha also sought to know who he was. The man introduced himself as Edgar. He politely told Lisha to leave the matter to him, expressing his desire to assist in closing the curtains on the story that had been woven. He assured her that he would not ruin the miracle. Edgar then addressed Viscount Givens, stating that it was a pleasure to make his acquaintance and explaining that he had come to visit Clausel under his master's orders. Viscount Givens grew irritated and demanded that Edgar reveal the name of his master. Edgar calmly drew out his dagger and displayed it. The Viscount, the knight, and the officials immediately recognized the emblem engraved upon it. Their shock at the sight of the emblem made it clear that they had already realized the identity of Edgar's master. Lisha, however, remained confused. Viscount Givens dismissed the display as absurd, claiming that Edgar was attempting to deceive him. Edgar stated that falsifying a noble's emblem was a crime punishable by death. He added that he believed someone as distinguished as Viscount Givens should already be well aware of that fact. The Viscount's composure cracked, his irritation rising sharply. Edgar then shifted his attention to one of the officials from the imperial court. He informed the official that, under his master's instructions, he had been granted permission to move freely if he were to harbor any doubts about this imperial matter. He further stated that he had also been authorized to speak in his master's name. The official understood the implication. Edgar continued, explaining that there were too many puzzling aspects surrounding the verdict. For that reason, he proposed that a retrial should take place in Clausel. The official was visibly shaken by the suggestion. The official attempted to object, but Edgar interrupted him. He declared that his master was greatly indebted to House Clausel because of Len Ashton. For that reason, if the matter were to reach an unpleasant conclusion, he had been instructed to support them until the very end. Both the official and Viscount Givens were taken aback. Frustration clouded the Viscount's thoughts as he questioned why the master had chosen this moment to intervene. He could not understand why such a figure would have any reason to involve his power in this matter. Edgar explained that his master had decided to assist Len and Lisha in any way possible after witnessing the miracle they had brought about. Viscount Givens was left confused by the mention of a miracle. Edgar clarified that Len Ashton had once saved a certain person's life in the past. Then, as if recalling a detail, Edgar brought up something Viscount Givens had said earlier about outclassing them. Chapter 18. After an entire month had passed, Len finally opened his eyes and found Lady Lisha beside him. His mind was still unclear, and he tried to understand where he was. A moment later, Lady Lisha stirred awake. As soon as she saw that he was conscious, she leaned toward him and held him tightly, tears falling in relief and happiness. Not long after, he learned something that left him stunned. He had been asleep for a full month since the day they arrived at Clausel. Baron Clausel confirmed this himself. He told Len that there was no need for him to rise yet and that he should allow them to continue caring for him until his wounds had fully healed. The Baron then spoke about what had happened after that day. A retrial had been arranged on the very same day as the incident, and the result had ended in his acquittal. The Baron made it clear that this outcome had only been possible because of Len and Lisha, and he expressed his deep gratitude for what they had done. He went on to explain that because of the acquittal, several charges were instead brought against Viscount Givens. The initial trial had been planned to take place within the Viscount's own territory. However, before it could proceed, the Viscount had taken his own life using poison he had secretly kept hidden. Len was shaken by this news. He questioned whether it had truly been suicide. The Baron answered that the Viscount might have been pressured by close relatives, or perhaps he had lost the will to continue and decided that death was preferable to facing arrest. The Baron added that someone had set fire to the Viscount's mansion, and the estate had been completely reduced to ashes. He repeated that he could not express enough gratitude toward Len. In the end, the reason the case had been resolved and the authority of a greater noble had prevailed was ultimately because of Len. Len found it difficult to follow the meaning of those words and asked for clarification. The Baron explained that it was connected to Chief Wolven. He stated that although valuable medicinal ingredients could be created from the materials of Chief Wolven, the process required several of its organs. If even one of those organs were missing, refining the medicine would be impossible. Because of how difficult it was to harvest, those materials were rarely seen in the public market. The Chief Wolven that Len had defeated, however, had been in perfect condition. Not a single organ had been damaged. With that in mind, and under the condition of cooperating when the situation required it, the Baron made a deal with the Marquis, who had been searching for those very materials. The Baron told Len that it was because of him that the Marquis' daughter, who had suffered from illness for many years, was finally able to be saved. He then handed Len a card and explained that the Marquis wished to personally convey his gratitude. The Baron had been entrusted with delivering an invitation to the Marquis mansion. As Len examined the card, he recognized the crest printed on it. He had seen it before. After a moment, he recalled where it came from. It belonged to Marquis Ignart, known as the pride of the royal family and one of the great nobles. It was the emblem of the Ignart house. It was also the crest of the final boss from The Legend of the Seven Heroes. Marquis Ignart had been a great noble who excelled in both literary and military fields and had overseen the empire's proud maritime industry. Yet he had cooperated with enemies who sought to revive the Demon King, a man who aimed to bring ruin to the Leomel Empire. Len quietly reflected on what he remembered. If his memory was correct, it had been the death of Marquis Ignart's daughter that pushed the Marquis to rebel against the Emperor. Len had never once considered interfering in that event. He found it hard to believe that he himself was the one who had saved that young lady's life. He began to wonder whether the story of the game had already started to change. A week passed after that. Len's parents, who had been evacuated when the village was attacked, came to Clausel after learning that he was safe. Their home had been completely burned down, but they had managed to bring with them everything that had not been consumed by the fire. Len's father looked at him with pride and told him that he was remarkable. Not long ago he had only been a baby, and now he had grown into a fine young man. Len answered that it was not true at all. Then something came back to his mind. He began to reflect on what had happened before. At that time, his arm had felt as if it absorbed the magic power from the demon stone. There was no longer anything written about it on the bracelet. He wondered why it had reacted the instant it touched Lisha. He also questioned what the demon sword that appeared during the recent battle with the monster truly was. After a few moments, Len and Lisha went outside. Lisha told him that she was relieved to see that his parents seemed well. Len agreed, but his gaze lingered on her. Lisha noticed and questioned why he was suddenly staring at her. Len apologized and brushed it off. Lisha commented that there had been a noticeable warmth behind that look. Len smiled lightly and remarked that he had simply been wondering whether Lisha had a demon stone inside her body. Lisha was startled and asked how he knew. She questioned whether he had heard it from her father. Len quickly apologized and denied it, explaining that he had only been attempting a joke. He then asked if perhaps all saints possessed something like that. Lisha clarified that this was not the case. She hesitated at first, but because it was Len, she chose to speak. She explained that even among saints, only the most powerful ones carried demon stones within their bodies. She asked him to keep it a secret. She added that only the families of saints and the high priests of the temple were aware of this truth. Len acknowledged that he understood. Len reflected further and considered whether the demon sword might be connected to the tragedy in The Legend of the Seven Heroes. If the demon sword truly held such power, then the possibility could not be dismissed. He fell silent, questioning whether that was truly the reason. Perhaps it had not happened simply because he wished to awaken a demon sword, but because there had been no other choice. When he looked back on it, Len realized how desperate he had been to avoid that future. Because of that fear, he had tried to avoid contact with Lisha until recently. Yet despite all of that effort he had still ended up in Clausel under these circumstances. He believed it began when he defeated the chief wolven with his own hands. That event had not unfolded the way it did in the dream he once saw of his past in The Legend of the Seven Heroes. The flow of the story now felt different. He began to think that he might have altered it. His father, who was meant to die. Yurku, who was meant to become his mid-boss. Even the fate of the Ignart family's daughter had changed. With that in mind, Len wondered if it was possible that Marquis Ignart would no longer turn his blade against the Leomel Empire. Each decision Len made seemed to ripple outward, shaping this world in ways he had not expected. After thinking through all of it, Lisha reached out and gently placed her hands on his face. She asked why he had suddenly fallen silent. Len looked at her and answered that it was about his own existence, explaining that he had been wondering who he truly was. Lisha told him that he was Len, her hero, and no one else. She added that he was somewhat sneaky, someone who had defeated her when they first met and yet could suddenly speak such gentle words. Len looked at her, quietly taking in everything she had said. Some time later, inside the headmaster's office at the Imperial Military Academy, a newspaper lay open. The article reported that while some claimed the beam of light that appeared in Clausel's territory was the work of the Clausel family's pride saint, its true origin remained uncertain. It questioned whether the flashes of light that began in the Sky Continent and had now spread elsewhere might be the power of a hero. It also described the light that emerged from the faction conflict as the wrath of the chief god Wolven. Headmaster Cronoa Highland let out a quiet sigh as she read the article. She found herself wishing that somewhere in this world, there might be someone capable of easing her boredom. Within the imperial capital of The Legend of the Seven Heroes, several incidents unfolded as the story progressed. A nobleman lost his life under unknown circumstances, and an imperial guard turned against the third prince. The one at the center of it all was the head of the imperialists, Marquis Ignart. While many believed these events to be a form of divine punishment, that belief was far from the truth. The strange incidents that troubled the capital were all carried out by a single man driven by revenge. That man was Marquis Ignart. He had been in desperate search of a cure for his sick daughter, yet no matter how far he searched, he could not find the necessary ingredients to create it. In time, he discovered that the imperial family possessed what he needed. Even so, the emperor refused his request. Those materials were reserved in case something happened to the imperial family, making the emperor's decision reasonable. However, because of that decision, the Marquis lost his daughter. From that moment, resentment toward the emperor began to grow within him. Yet now, that future would no longer come to pass. Meanwhile, in the imperial capital, Marquis Ignart spoke with Edgar and questioned whether Len was truly that remarkable. Edgar responded with certainty, making it clear there was no mistake. He expressed his belief that even the Marquis himself would recognize that Len Ashton's worth could not be easily measured. The Marquis acknowledged the explanation and regarded it as a good account. He felt a sense of gratitude, as it had eased some of the irritation he held toward His Majesty. Edgar attempted to respond further, but the Marquis stopped him, making it clear there was no need to continue, as his words had already been sincere. The Marquis then reflected on the Emperor's decision, recognizing that the requested ingredients were withheld for the sake of the imperial family. He understood the reasoning behind it, yet whether he could accept it remained a different matter altogether. Then, all of a sudden, a voice called out, addressing him as father. It was Fiona, the daughter of Marquis Ignart. She also acknowledged Edgar's return. Edgar stepped closer to Fiona and expressed his intention to lend her a hand as well. Fiona reassured him that there was no need to worry, as he had already done his best, and she then asked about his trip to Clausel. Edgar answered that it had been wonderful, and calmly added that Fiona did not need to speak to him so formally, considering his status as a commoner. Fiona responded with quiet politeness, making it clear that he should already understand that the way she spoke was influenced by his mother. She then turned her attention to her father and expressed her wish to go to Clausel to convey her gratitude to Len Ashton. The Marquis acknowledged that he shared the same desire. However, Baron Clausel had requested that he wait. As they belonged to different factions, his position as a Marquis meant that he was the one who had to comply. Fiona then considered whether sending a letter would be acceptable. Marquis Ignart thought that it would be fine on a personal level, but stated that they should respect Baron Clausel's wishes for now and asked her to wait a little longer. Fiona accepted his decision. In silence, she held on to the thought that one day, she would surely convey her gratitude. Within the Clausel mansion, deep into the night, Len focused his attention on a rare item, the Sarakia's blue sphere. As he observed it, he felt as though it was absorbing his energy. The item resembled an egg, its surface acting as a protective shell. It was so hard that even the finest swords could not cut through it. Simply touching it was enough to sense the immense power contained within. It was said that the egg could be hatched by supplying a vast amount of magical power along with the horn of a great dragon. Once the creature inside was born, it would swear absolute loyalty to its master. Len recalled that, if his memory was correct, the game's description of the item stated that within the shell rested a monster, one that had supposedly caused even the Demon King to struggle, holding absolute control over the powers of ice and darkness. No one had ever discovered how to hatch it, nor had they found any other use for the egg. In time, it was generally accepted that it was likely a paywalled item, something that required payment to unlock. While he was deep in thought, a knock came from the door, and Lisha entered. She apologized for arriving so late at night and asked if she could have a moment of his time. Lisha noticed that Len was once again staring at the unusual jewel. Len explained that it had been dropped by the chief wolven, and that his parents had brought it along with his change of clothes the other day. Lisha observed that the item had not been burned by the fire. Len quietly considered that if an incredibly powerful monster truly slept within it, it would be better to leave it untouched rather than sell it. In any case, it was far too durable to be destroyed. Lisha then asked how much longer Len intended to stay in Clausel. Len replied that his physical condition had improved significantly and that he planned to leave after meeting her one more time. Lisha suggested that, in that case, he should remain until they had met 1,000 more times. Len regarded the idea as something far in the future. In his thoughts, even if they met every day, it would still take just under 3 years. Lisha then conveyed that her father had said it would be fine for Len to continue living in that room. Len showed concern about his work, and Lisha accepted this, no longer insisting on meeting 1,000 times, but instead asking him to stay just a little longer. Their gazes met, and Len accepted that, for a little while longer, he would remain under Lisha's care. From then on, Len continued spending his days with Lady Lisha, meeting her daily and occasionally going out together to shop in town. His life during that time felt calm and fulfilling. Until one day, the Holy Knights arrived at Clausel. Weiss confirmed that their purpose was to observe the young lady's sword skills. With the opportunity now present, Weiss invited Len to come and watch them. Len agreed and asked whether the one who had arrived was a well-known knight. Weiss affirmed that the man was capable enough to lead the Holy Knights. As for his abilities, Weiss noted that he was known for something referred to as the Holy Sword Technique. Len recognized the name of the Holy Sword Technique, recalling that it was a sword style created by the hero Ruin and that many knights chose to train in it. Weiss confirmed this, explaining that knights often studied styles that suited them best alongside basic swordsmanship. Among all those styles, the holy sword technique stood as the most widely practiced. There were many schools of sword fighting across the world. Regardless of the school one followed, its techniques allowed the user to perform combat moves by consuming magical power. For those born without natural skills, these combat techniques often served as an important substitute. Len quietly reflected on this, remembering the movements from the game. He considered that by imitating others, he might be able to use combat techniques as well. Yet at the same time, he recognized that it would not be that simple. Weiss then mentioned that he himself was not well suited for the holy sword technique, which led him to devote his entire life to mastering imperial swordsmanship. Len regarded that choice as admirable, recognizing imperial swordsmanship as a style focused on protection, ultimately for the sake of Lord Lezard. Weiss then offered to teach Len if he was interested, and Len readily accepted the opportunity to learn. As Len reflected further, he recalled that in the Legend of the Seven Heroes, Lady Lisha had been highly skilled in the holy sword technique. The holy sword technique was an all-around style, capable of handling offense, defense, and even supportive techniques. It also allowed those who possessed skills to integrate them into their fighting style. Practitioners of each sword style were ranked based on their ability, and Lady Lisha held the title of Sword Saint, a rank just one step below the highest. The strongest among them were granted the title of Sword King. Even when considering all sword schools across the world, only 5 individuals held that title. Len then wondered whether Weiss had ever considered learning other techniques. Weiss acknowledged that he had, mentioning the strong sword technique as an example. However, mastering that style required innate talent, which was also the reason so few people were able to practice it. The strong sword technique lingered in Len's thoughts. The founder of that school was known as the Lion King, an ancestor of Leomel. In the Legend of the Seven Heroes, it was a style used exclusively by members of the faction that opposed the imperial family. Sword styles and skills were fundamentally different, which meant it could not be learned even by playing through the game a second time. Its offensive and defensive power were both overwhelmingly fierce. Many players had been deeply disappointed upon realizing there was no possible way to obtain or learn that technique. Len found himself recalling those unpleasant memories. Those who used the strong sword technique were already powerful by design, and on top of that, their attacks carried an effect that permanently reduced their opponent's stats. Because of this, Len had always disliked facing them. There was also an unavoidable attack within that style that could bring about near-instant death. Watching the sparring from a short distance away, Len was approached by Lisha, who encouraged him to train together. Len responded that he had only come to observe. At that moment, the commander addressed him, indicating that he would be welcome to join the SAINTESS if he wished. The commander had already heard about Len from the SAINTESS, recognizing that Len possessed talent that surpassed even hers. He had also received confirmation from another, and from what he had gathered, Len appeared to have a promising future as a knight. Len denied the claim, not accepting that assessment. Even so, the commander expressed a desire to see Len's abilities for himself and suggested a brief sparring match. Not long after, their swords met and the spar began. They exchanged continuous and precise strikes, each matching the other with skill. The commander advised that Len should fight in his usual manner, without attempting to imitate their sword style. Len found himself uncertain about those words, unsure of what it meant to fight as he normally would. He then realized that his thoughts had drifted back to the world of the game, leading him to unconsciously mimic the holy sword technique. Regaining focus, Len prepared himself and moved forward, releasing a series of relentless strikes. The commander blocked every attack with ease, and in that moment he came to an understanding. Though he had not expected it, he felt a brief sense of regret for what he was about to do. With a single swift motion, the commander delivered a precise strike toward Len, causing both Lisha and the others to react in surprise. Len managed to block the attack. The commander found it difficult to accept. He had been fully intent on breaking through Len's defense, yet Len had successfully stopped the strike. After that exchange, Len and the commander came to a pause. The man then asked for Len's name. Len offered an apology for the delayed introduction and gave his name. The commander then expressed that, regrettably, Len did not appear to be suited for the holy sword technique. Len felt uncertain at those words, and Lisha found it difficult to understand, especially considering Len's strength. The commander acknowledged Len's strength without denying it. However, he made it clear that the matter was not about strength, but about suitability. It was rooted in the ingrained habits Len had developed through the training he received from his father. Len's fighting style carried an aggressive and fierce nature, which formed its core. Those natural tendencies, while effective, would quickly become a hindrance if he attempted to learn the holy sword technique. Even if he underwent some level of training, the commander believed it would be difficult for Len to continue along that path. The commander further explained that even if Len did learn the holy sword technique, it was unlikely that he would be able to properly acquire any combat techniques. In Len's case, it would be better not to handle the sword carelessly and risk developing unusual habits. Len accepted this reasoning. With that in mind, he then asked if it would be possible to instead be taught the fundamentals of swordsmanship. The commander agreed without hesitation, considering it an honor to guide someone with such promise. Sometime later, while on their way back, another man spoke to the commander. He questioned the earlier conclusion, noting that Len's aggressive nature did not necessarily mean he could not learn the holy sword technique, and wondered why the commander had said otherwise. The commander explained that it was because they had crossed swords. From that brief exchange, he had sensed that the boy likely possessed a talent suited for a different sword style.